He had $37 billion in the bank, a penthouse on the 42nd floor, and exactly 19 hours to prove he deserved to be someone's father. The phone call came at 2:14 in the morning. A social worker's voice, flat and clinical, told Adrian Cross that the woman he had once loved was dead, and that she had left behind a 7-year-old girl who shared his last name without ever knowing it. He hadn't known either. 7 years. Not a single phone call answered, not a single message read. Now a little girl's entire future rested on a man who had never once shown up. If this story moves you, hit that like button, drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because what happens next will break your heart before it puts it back together. The night Adrian Cross received the phone call that destroyed him, he was celebrating. That detail would bother him for a long time afterward. The specific cruelty of the timing, the way the universe had apparently decided that the precise moment he deserved to feel good about himself was the right moment to tear the floor out from under him. It was a Thursday, late October, the kind of night in Manhattan where the cold hadn't fully committed yet, where you could still stand on a rooftop terrace without your hands going numb. And Adrian was standing on exactly that kind of rooftop, holding a glass of 12-year-old whiskey he hadn't actually been drinking. He'd been holding it for 40 minutes, using it as a prop more than anything else, something to do with his hands while his head of acquisitions walked him through the final numbers on the Meridian deal. A commercial real estate portfolio that had taken 14 months to negotiate and would, when the ink dried tomorrow morning, add roughly $400 million to his net worth. People kept congratulating him, clapping him on the shoulder, laughing too loudly at things he said that weren't especially funny. That was how these things worked. When you were worth $37 billion, people laughed at your jokes and pretended your whiskey preference was fascinating and treated your opinions on art or politics or food as though they were pronouncements from a higher plane of understanding. Adrian had learned, somewhere around his 28th birthday, not to mistake any of that for actual connection. He was smiling at something his CFO was saying, smiling on autopilot, the expression he'd long since mastered, pleasant and engaged while his mind was somewhere else entirely, when his phone buzzed against his thigh. He almost ignored it. The screen read unknown number, and under normal circumstances, Adrian Cross did not take calls from unknown numbers at 11:45 on a Thursday night. He had people for that. He had assistants and gatekeepers and a chief of staff whose entire job included filtering out exactly this kind of thing. But something made him step away from the group. Something he couldn't explain then and couldn't explain later. Some instinct or pull that made him hold up one finger. Excuse me, 1 second. And walk to the far edge of the terrace where the noise of the party faded into the hiss of wind off the Hudson. "Cross," he said. The woman on the other end of the line had a careful, practiced voice, the kind you develop when you spend years delivering bad news and have learned that the fastest way through it is directly through it. "Mr. Cross, my name is Diane Mercer. I'm a family services coordinator with the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. I'm calling because we've been trying to reach you for several days, and I want to be very upfront with you. This call concerns a matter of some urgency." Adrian's first thought was that someone was scamming him. Sophisticated social engineering, maybe, targeting his personal line somehow. He was already composing his response, the polite but firm dismissal, when the woman said a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in 7 years. "This concerns Claire Hathaway, or rather it concerns the daughter she left behind." The whiskey glass tilted in Adrian's hand. He caught it, barely. "What do you mean?" he said carefully. "Left behind." A beat. Not long. Diane Mercer had probably learned to keep those pauses short, because the longer they stretched, the more the person on the other end filled them with the wrong kind of hoping. "Ms. Hathaway passed away 4 days ago, Mr. Cross. Complications following an emergency surgery. She was 31 years old." Another small pause. "She had a daughter, Lily. She's 7. And according to documentation Ms. Hathaway left with her attorney, you are listed as Lily's biological father." The rooftop sounds came back to Adrian in strange fragments. Laughter, ice in glasses, the CFO saying something that was probably funny. Wind. He realized distantly that he had pressed his back against the terrace railing and that both his hands had gone completely numb. That's not possible, he said, and even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were the wrong words, knew they were the words of a man grasping for something that wasn't there. Claire and we ended things 7 years ago. She didn't tell me. Mr. Cross. Diane Mercer's voice was not unkind, but it was firm. The documentation is quite clear, and a preliminary DNA analysis, conducted with a sample provided by Ms. Hathaway's attorney under court authorization, is consistent with paternity. I understand this is a great deal to absorb, but I need you to understand that Lily is currently an emergency foster placement, and there is a custody hearing scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. If you intend to assert your parental rights, you need to appear. Tomorrow, Adrian repeated. 2 p.m. Family Court, Manhattan. Judge Renata Voss presiding. He stood there for a long time after the call ended, long enough that his CFO came looking for him, appeared at the far end of the terrace with a curious expression and a fresh glass of something Adrian didn't want, and stopped when he saw whatever was on Adrian's face. "Hey, you okay?" "No," Adrian said. It was possibly the most honest thing he'd said all evening. "Clear my calendar for tomorrow. Everything. And get me Marcus Chen's cell number." That's your family law attorney, right? Adrian, just get me the number, Dad. He didn't sleep. He sat in his home office on the 40th floor of his own building, and he did not sleep. And somewhere around 2 in the morning, after he'd called Marcus Chen and woken him up and spent 45 minutes being walked through the procedural landscape of emergency custody hearings, after he'd hung up and sat in the silence with the Manhattan skyline spread out below him like something that no longer made any sense, Adrian Cross opened the bottom drawer of his desk and took out the thing he kept there. It wasn't much to look at. A phone. Old model, the kind that had been outdated by 3 generations by now. The screen cracked across the lower right corner from a fall it had taken in an airport in 2017. He'd never had it repaired. He'd barely turned it on since he'd switched devices. He plugged it into a charger he had to dig out of a box in the back of his closet and waited. When it booted up, it made a sound like a small earthquake. The accumulated notifications of years, vibrating through in waves, texts and emails and voicemails that no one had ever cleared. Most of it was irrelevant. Promotional emails, calendar reminders for meetings that had happened half a decade ago. But not all of it. He found the texts first. There were 43 of them from Claire's number. The first dated November 12th, 2017, 3 months after the last time he'd seen her. He could still remember that last conversation, or more accurately, he had been failing to not remember it for 7 years. They'd been in her apartment in Brooklyn, the one with the broken radiator that made noise like a dying animal all winter, and he had stood by the window and told her, as gently as he knew how, that he couldn't be what she needed, that the company was at a critical juncture, that he had responsibilities he couldn't set aside, obligations to investors and employees, and a vision of something that required everything he had, that he cared about her, deeply, genuinely, but that caring about someone wasn't always enough. She had looked at him for a long time without saying anything. Then she'd said, "Okay, Adrian." Just that. No argument, no tears, no scene. Just okay, and a small nod, like she was filing the information away somewhere. He had told himself afterward that the clean break was better, that it was kinder, that dragging things out would have only made everything harder for both of them. He had been telling himself that for 7 years. November 12th, 2017. Adrian, I know you said what you said, and I know you meant it. I'm not calling to argue. I just need to tell you something. Can you call me back? It's important. November 19th, 2017. I really need to talk to you, please. December 2nd, 2017. I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but this isn't about us anymore. Please call me. December 20th, 2017. I'm going to have a baby, Adrian. I'm 4 months pregnant. I've been trying to tell you since October. I'm not asking you for anything. I just thought you had the right to know. Adrian's hand was shaking. He kept reading. January 8th, 2018. I've decided I'm keeping her. I know that's my choice to make. I'm not going to keep trying to reach you. But if you ever change your mind, I want you to know that the door isn't closed. March 3rd, 2018. She's going to be here in a few weeks. I keep hoping you'll call. April 29th, 2018. Her name is Lily. She has your eyes. There were more after that, scattered across the years, growing less frequent as time passed. Birthday updates. A photograph described in words because he'd never opened it. A note on what would have been Lily's first day of kindergarten. She was so brave. She held my hand all the way to the door and then just walked right in. I wish you could have seen it. The last one was dated 14 months ago, April 19th of last year. I don't know why I keep doing this. You clearly made your choice a long time ago, but I got some medical news today that scared me, and I guess old habits die hard. Take care of yourself, Adrian. He sat with that for a long time. Outside the window, the city kept moving. Taxis, lights, the distant sound of something, sirens or music, he couldn't tell. The skyline he had worked so hard to be part of, to own a piece of, to look down at from high enough up that it felt like evidence of something. He'd ignored 43 messages. He'd ignored a pregnancy. He'd ignored a child's entire first 7 years of life. Not because he hadn't cared, he was only beginning to understand, in this moment, that he had never allowed himself to think about whether he cared, but because it had been easier not to know. Because not reading the messages meant not having to respond to them. Because building walls around the things that complicated your life was a skill he had developed early and refined with great dedication. He had a daughter. He had a daughter, and her mother was dead, and in 14 hours there was going to be a hearing where a judge would decide whether that daughter got to have any kind of father at all. Adrian Cross put the old phone down on his desk. He looked at his hands. Then he picked up his current phone and called Marcus Chen back. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," he said when Marcus answered, voice rough from not sleeping, from everything else. "I need to know exactly what it's going to take to walk out of that courtroom tomorrow with my daughter." Marcus Chen was one of the best family law attorneys in New York, a compact, precise man in his mid-50s who had represented enough billionaires in custody proceedings to have developed a calm that Adrian found simultaneously reassuring and deeply unsettling. He arrived at Adrian's building at 7 in the morning with 2 paralegals, a banker's box of documents, and a coffee that he did not offer to share. "All right," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from Adrian's desk, as though it were any ordinary morning meeting. "Let's talk about where we are." "Walk me through it." The short version: the court's primary concern in any emergency custody determination is the best interest of the child. In Lily's case, that assessment is complicated by several factors. Marcus opened the folder. First, you have had 0 documented involvement in this child's life. 0. Not a single support payment, not a single visitation, not so much as a birthday card. You are, on paper, an absent father who only became interested in his child when the mother died, and there was no one else to take responsibility. "That's not—" Adrian stopped. "That's accurate." "Yes," Marcus agreed without any particular judgment in his voice. That was another thing about Marcus. He didn't judge. He assessed. Second, Judge Voss is known for taking a dim view of situations where significant financial resources are used as a substitute for genuine parental engagement. She has denied custody to wealthy parents before, explicitly on the grounds that material wealth doesn't compensate for emotional unavailability. Money is not going to win this case for you, Adrian. In fact, it may actively work against you. So what does win it? Marcus looked at him steadily. Evidence that you can provide Lily with a stable, emotionally present home environment, not a nanny, not a team of people paid to perform parental functions, an actual home. And ideally, he paused. Ideally what? Ideally, a 2-parent household. I know how that sounds. I know it's 2024 and the law doesn't technically require. You're telling me I need a wife. I'm telling you that Judge Voss has granted emergency custody in similar cases to single parents, but that every single one of those cases involved documented evidence of prior involvement with the child. You have none of that. A stable 2-parent household would address the gap. It's not a guarantee, but it's the strongest argument we have given the timeline. Adrian stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to need a few hours this morning before we meet with the court." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What for?" "I have a phone call to make. Maybe 2. He'd met Nora Hayes once. That was the honest truth of it, and it made what he was about to do either the most rational decision he'd made in years or the most absurd. The meeting had happened 6 weeks earlier, at a community center board meeting in Harlem that Adrian had attended primarily because his PR team had told him that visible philanthropic engagement in local communities would be beneficial in the context of a pending zoning dispute. He had not expected to learn anything. He had not expected to pay attention to anyone in particular. He had expected to write a check and smile for 2 or 3 photographs and leave. He had not expected to watch a woman in a grocery store uniform. She'd come straight from a shift, clearly, had her apron still folded over her arm, systematically dismantle the board's plan to redirect community center funding away from its after-school programs and toward what the proposal described as enhanced facilities. She'd done it without raising her voice, without theatrics. With just this patient, relentless clarity that reminded Adrian in an uncomfortable way of the best negotiators he'd ever faced across a conference table. When the meeting ended, he had asked the board chair who she was. Nora Hayes, 30 years old, worked the morning shift at the grocery store on 125th Street, cleaned houses 3 afternoons a week, and volunteered every Friday evening at the assisted living facility 4 blocks from where she'd grown up. No college degree, not yet. She'd had to drop out when her mother got sick and never quite found the path back. She'd grown up in the same apartment building she still lived in, and according to the board chair was apparently known to approximately everyone in a 12-block radius as the person you called when something needed to get done and done right. Adrian had filed that information away without any clear sense of why. Now, at 7:30 in the morning, standing in his kitchen with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking, he understood. He didn't have her number. He had to call the community center to get it, which required explaining to a very confused receptionist that no, he didn't want to leave a message. He needed the direct number. And yes, he understood that it was not quite 8 in the morning. He eventually had to have Marcus call with a slightly more official tone before the receptionist relented. Nora answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Wary. She didn't recognize the number. Ms. Hayes, my name is Adrian Cross. He'd thought about how to start this a dozen times in the previous hour and had failed to land on anything that didn't sound insane from the first sentence. We met at the Harlem Community Center board meeting last month. You probably don't remember. I remember, she said. You were the billionaire who sat in the back and left before the snacks. He blinked. Yes, that was me. What can I do for you, Mr. Cross? I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond because I'm aware of how it's going to sound. He took a breath. I need someone to marry me. Today, or as close to today as legally possible. I have a daughter I didn't know about until last night. Her mother just died, and there's a custody hearing this afternoon where a judge is going to decide whether I deserve to raise her. My attorney believes a 2-parent household would significantly strengthen my case, and you are, I don't have a better way to say this, you are the most genuinely decent person I've encountered in recent memory, and I need someone decent, not an actress, not someone I pay to perform something, someone who is actually... He stopped, started again. I know this is insane. I know you have no reason to say yes. Name whatever terms you want. I'll meet them. Silence on the other end of the line. A long silence. Mr. Cross, Nora said finally. Her voice was careful, measured, not angry, exactly. Are you asking me to fake a relationship for a family court judge? I'm asking you to help a 7-year-old girl not go into foster care. Another silence, shorter this time. Tell me about her, Nora said. So he did. He stood in his kitchen and told Nora Hayes about Lily. Everything Diane Mercer had told him, everything Marcus had told him, everything in those 43 text messages that he had read and reread until he knew them by heart. He talked for 20 minutes without stopping, and when he finished, the silence that followed felt different from the one before. You ignored 43 messages, Nora said. Yes. From a pregnant woman. Yes. And you're just finding this out now. Yes. He paused. I know what that makes me look like. I know what it probably makes me. It makes you look like someone who made a very serious mistake and is now trying to figure out how to live with it, Nora said. There was something in her voice that wasn't quite softness, but was adjacent to it. A kind of deliberateness, like she was choosing each word with care. That's different from being irredeemable, Mr. Cross, but it's still a serious mistake. I know. I'm not going to perform something for a judge. If I agree to this, and I haven't agreed yet, it has to be real. Whatever we are, whatever I am to this child, it has to be actual. That's what I want, Adrian said, and meant it. If I meet you at that courthouse this afternoon and I see something I don't like, about you, about how you talk about Lily, about what you actually want out of this, I will walk out. Understood? And the child comes first, not your reputation, not your business, not whatever this looks like to the press. Lily comes first, always. Yes. I need to make a call, Nora said. Give me an hour. Yeah. She called back in 40 minutes. Okay, she said. That was all she said. One word. Adrian stood in his living room holding the phone and felt something in his chest that he didn't have a name for. Not relief exactly. Something more complicated than relief. Something that felt like the very early tentative beginning of a reckoning. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. A pause. And Mr. Cross, I need you to understand that I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Lily. I know, he said. I know. The courthouse was the particular kind of aggressively neutral that government buildings specialize in. Beige walls, fluorescent light, the smell of old coffee, and bureaucratic effort. Adrian arrived with Marcus and 2 additional members of his legal team, all of them in the kind of suits that said, "We are serious," and prepared without being ostentatious, which Marcus had specified with the precision of a military briefing. Nora was already there. She had arrived before him. That was the first thing. She was sitting in a plastic chair in the hallway outside the assigned courtroom, still in her coat, with a bag on the floor beside her that looked like it might have contained everything she'd thought to bring on short notice. She stood when she saw him coming. Adrian had seen her once before, at the board meeting, but he'd been across the room and hadn't registered her the way he registered her now. She was medium height, dark-haired, with the kind of face that wasn't conventionally striking but that you kept looking at. Something in the directness of her expression, the way she didn't arrange herself for anyone else's benefit. She looked tired. She'd probably been up since before he called. "Mr. Cross," she said. "Adrian," he said. "If we're doing this, probably Adrian." She almost smiled, not quite. "Nora." Marcus stepped forward and spent 15 minutes walking them both through what would happen inside, what they needed to demonstrate, how they should present themselves. Nora listened to all of it without interrupting, asked 2 sharp questions that impressed Marcus visibly, and then nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Let's go meet the judge." Judge Renata Voss was in her mid-60s, with silver hair and the expression of someone who had spent enough years on the family court bench to have heard every possible permutation of every possible excuse, and who had consequently developed a very low tolerance for anything that wasn't honest. She looked at Adrian for a long time after Marcus presented the case for emergency custody. "Mr. Cross," she said, "let me be direct with you. I've reviewed the documentation provided by Ms. Hathaway's estate. I've reviewed the preliminary DNA analysis. I've also reviewed the complete absence of any prior paternal involvement in Lily's life. So I want you to explain to me, in your own words and not your attorney's, why I should give this child to you." Marcus made a small movement at his side. The practiced attorney's signal for, "let me handle this." Adrian didn't look at him. "Because I made a mistake," he said. "A serious one. Claire sent me messages I didn't read, and I didn't read them because I had decided. I told myself that the clean break was better, that not engaging was cleaner. I told myself that so many times that I stopped questioning it." He paused. "I have no excuse for that. I'm not going to offer you one because there isn't one that holds up. I missed 7 years of my daughter's life, and nothing I do from this point forward is going to give those years back." The courtroom was very quiet. "What I can tell you," Adrian continued, "is that I intend to be present from this point forward. Not in the way that I write a check and hire someone to be present in my place, actually present. I understand I don't have a record of that. I understand that you have no reason to take my word for it. I'm asking for the opportunity to demonstrate it." Judge Voss studied him. Then she looked at Nora. And you, Ms. Hayes, you and Mr. Cross are recently, quite recently, engaged. We are, Nora said. Can you tell me why? Nora didn't hesitate. Because Lily needs someone in her life who is going to show up for her, and because I believe Adrian is trying to become that person. She paused. I know that's not a love story, Your Honor. I know what this looks like from the outside. But I'm not here to perform something. I'm here because I think this little girl deserves a chance at a real family, and I believe that's what we can give her. Judge Voss was quiet for a moment. Then she made some notations on the document in front of her. I'm going to grant a 30-day provisional placement, she said. Mr. Cross, you will have supervised visitation for the first 2 weeks, after which the court will conduct a home evaluation. Ms. Mercer from OCFS will be your point of contact. She looked up. I want to be very clear about something. I'm granting this provisional placement not because of your financial resources or your legal representation or even because of your accelerated engagement. I'm granting it because you both sat in front of me and said something honest. If the home evaluation tells me something different from what I heard today, we will revisit this arrangement immediately. Are we understood? Yes, Your Honor, Adrian said. Yes, said Nora. The judge gathered her papers. Miss Mercer will arrange the initial meeting with Lily for tomorrow morning. She paused, pen in hand, and looked directly at Adrian one more time. Mr. Cross, children are not acquisitions. They cannot be managed. They cannot be delegated. I've seen very powerful people learn that lesson the hard way in this courtroom. Don't be one of them. Yes, ma'am, he said. Outside in the hallway afterward, Marcus was already on his phone, managing the next logistical piece of what had become an extremely complicated day. The two paralegals had drifted toward the elevator. Adrian stood with Nora in the particular silence that follows something that can't be taken back. That went better than I expected, Nora said. Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair, looked at the floor. Thank you for what you said in there. I meant it, she said. He looked up. I know. That's what made it work. A pause opened up between them, the kind that happens when two people are trying to figure out what on earth they've just agreed to. So, Nora said, I guess I should probably see the place where this child is going to be living. Right, yes. Adrian straightened. I have a car outside. Does it have a driver? It does. Of course it does, Nora said, with something that wasn't quite a smile but was in the same neighborhood. She picked up her bag. Let's go then. They walked toward the elevator. Not together exactly. There was still too much unfamiliarity in the air between them for that. Too much that hadn't been said and wouldn't be said for a while yet. But side by side, which was something. Outside, the October air had finally made up its mind. It was properly cold now. Adrian's driver was waiting at the curb, and as they came through the courthouse doors, Adrian glanced sideways at the woman walking next to him, this stranger he had called out of nowhere 8 hours ago, who had said yes to the most irrational thing he'd ever asked of anyone, who had sat in front of a family court judge and been honest in a way that had quite possibly changed everything. He didn't know her. She didn't know him. There was a 7-year-old girl he had never met who was going to be placed provisionally into a home that had to become real before the court came back to evaluate it. He had built an empire, brick by brick, on the principle that any problem with a clear enough goal and sufficient resources could be solved if you approached it with enough intelligence and discipline. He was only beginning to understand that this was not that kind of problem. The car pulled away from the curb. Nora was looking out the window at the city. The buildings passed, the traffic moved. The gray October afternoon did what October afternoons do in New York. What's she like? Nora asked without turning from the window. Lily. What do you know about her? Almost nothing, Adrian said honestly. She likes to draw according to the social worker. She's quiet. He paused. She just lost her mother. Nora was quiet for a moment. She's going to be angry, she said. If she's 7, and she just lost her mother, and now she's being handed to a father she's never met, she's going to be angry, and that's right. She should be. I know. Whatever she throws at you, and she's 7, so what she throws at you might literally be things. You have to just absorb it. You don't get to be hurt by it. Not yet. Okay, Adrian said. I mean it. I know you mean it. Nora finally turned from the window and looked at him directly. She had this way of looking at people. Adrian would come to know it well over the coming months. Like she was running some kind of quiet internal assessment, some patient evaluation of whether what she was seeing was real. Whatever she saw, she didn't look away. Okay, she said. Tell me what the apartment looks like, or house, or whatever it is you have. It's a penthouse, Adrian said. Nora absorbed this. How many floors up? 42. And how many bedrooms? 5. 5 bedrooms, she said flatly, for one person. I have guests sometimes. She looked back out the window. We're going to need to make it feel smaller, she said. That's the first thing. Children don't need square footage. They need corners that feel like theirs. Adrian thought about his 5-bedroom, 4-bath, 3,000 square foot penthouse with its curated art collection and its views of Central Park and its kitchen that a chef came twice a week to stock and cook in. Whatever you think it needs, he said. I think it needs a lot, Nora said, but she said it quietly, without cruelty, and there was something in her voice that sounded less like judgment and more like someone who had just taken on a task and was already, practically, beginning to think about how to do it. The car moved north through the city. The light was going gold at the edges, the late afternoon doing its thing with the tall buildings. Somewhere across town, in an emergency foster placement, there was a 7-year-old girl with his eyes who didn't know his name, who had just lost the only person she'd ever been able to count on, and who was going to walk into his life tomorrow morning carrying everything a small person carries when the world has just broken open beneath them. Adrian Cross, who had built $37 billion out of will and intelligence and a comprehensive refusal to be unprepared, sat in the back of his car and felt, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, completely unprepared. It was, he would later come to understand, the most honest thing he'd felt in years. The penthouse looked different at 7 in the morning. Adrian had never particularly noticed this before. The way his apartment changed depending on when you were in it. The way the early light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows at a low, particular angle that made everything feel simultaneously vast and cold. He noticed it now because Nora was standing in the middle of his living room with her coat still on and her arms crossed, doing the thing she'd done in the car the previous evening. That quiet assessment, that patient taking in of information. And what she was seeing was clearly giving her a lot to think about. She'd arrived at 6:30. He hadn't asked her to come that early. She'd simply shown up, which he was beginning to understand was how she operated. Diane Mercer was bringing Lily at 9. That gave them 2.5 hours. Okay, Nora said, still looking around. So, Adrian agreed. The art. She gestured at the large abstract canvas on the far wall, something he'd paid $400,000 for at a Christie's auction, something his interior designer had told him anchored the room. It needs to come down. It's a Marcello Fente. I don't know what that means, and Lily definitely doesn't know what that means. What she's going to see is a very big, very dark piece of something that looks like a thunderstorm in a frame, and that's going to make this room feel like a museum instead of a home. Nora walked toward the kitchen. What do you have for breakfast food? Adrian followed her. There's a chef who stocks the... She opened the refrigerator, looked at its contents for a moment, closed it, opened it again. You have kombucha and what appears to be a single wheel of artisanal cheese, she said. There might be eggs. There are no eggs. She closed the refrigerator. I need you to give me your driver in about 45 minutes. Can you do that? Yes. And while I'm gone, take the painting down. He wanted to point out that the painting was bolted to the wall by a specialist and probably required that same specialist to remove it, but something about Nora's expression told him this would not be a productive contribution to the conversation. Okay, he said. She was gone for 40 minutes. In that time, Adrian called his building manager, who called the art handler who had installed the Fente, who arrived with admirable speed given the hour and removed it without comment. The wall where it had hung was lighter colored than the surrounding paint, a pale rectangle, conspicuous in its emptiness. Adrian stood and looked at it. Then he went to the storage room where he'd put a box of things his assistant had sent over from his previous office, dug through it, and found what he was looking for. A drawing. One of his employees' daughters had made it for him years ago at a company family day, a crayon rendering of what was apparently supposed to be a city skyline, cheerful and lopsided, and entirely wrong in its proportions. He'd kept it because getting rid of it had seemed unkind. He hung it on the pale rectangle of wall. It looked absurd. The whole room still looked like what it was. A billionaire's penthouse, a space designed to impress rather than to live in. But the drawing was there at least. A small human thing in all the careful architecture. Nora came back with 3 grocery bags, took one look at the wall, and said nothing for a moment. "It's temporary," Adrian said. "No," she said. "Leave it." She set the bags on the kitchen counter and started unloading them. Eggs, butter, a box of the particular brand of orange juice that came in the carton with the little cartoon sun, bread, a box of colored pencils, a sketch pad, 3 picture books that she must have found somewhere because he hadn't known there was anywhere near his building that sold picture books at 7 in the morning, and a small stuffed rabbit with one eye slightly larger than the other that looked like it had seen some things. "Where did you get the rabbit?" he asked. 24-hour pharmacy on Amsterdam. It's not perfect, but it's something." She looked at the sketch pad and colored pencils. "The social worker said she likes to draw." "Yeah." Nora was quiet for a moment, looking at the collection of things she'd laid out on his counter. Ordinary things, the kind of things that didn't belong in this kitchen, that looked slightly incongruous against the Italian marble and the custom cabinetry. Then she said, "She's going to walk in here, and it's still going to feel like a hotel. We can't fix that in 2 hours, but we can have breakfast ready and something for her hands to do, and we can make sure the first thing she sees isn't a $400,000 painting." "Okay," Adrian said. "Are you actually nervous?" Nora looked at him with what seemed like genuine curiosity. He considered lying. "Yes." "Good," she said simply, and turned to the stove. He watched her crack eggs into a bowl with the ease of someone who had done it 10,000 times, who had never had someone else do it for her. There was something in the way Nora moved through a space, even a space as foreign to her as his kitchen, that was unhurried and deliberate, like she had decided exactly how much energy the task required and had allocated precisely that amount, no more. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can try." "Why did you actually say yes?" "Yesterday. On the phone." He paused. "You didn't know me. You had no reason. I told you why. You told me it was for Lily, but you'd never met Lily. You didn't know anything about her." He leaned against the counter. "So why, actually?" Nora was quiet for a moment, whisking the eggs. "My mother got sick when I was 22, she said. "I was 2 semesters from finishing my degree. I came home to take care of her, and the plan was always that I'd go back once she was stable, once things were settled. It took 3 years. By the time she passed, I'd been out of school long enough that going back felt impossible, almost, like the path had grown over." She didn't look up from the bowl. "I'm not telling you that for sympathy. I'm telling you because during those 3 years there were people who showed up for us, and people who didn't. The ones who showed up, they weren't always the people you'd have predicted. Sometimes it was a neighbor. Sometimes it was someone we barely knew." She paused. "When you called me, you described a 7-year-old girl who had just lost her mother and was about to be placed with a stranger, and I thought, I could be one of the people who shows up." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "That's it," he said. "That's actually it. Don't make it more complicated than it is." She poured the eggs into the pan. "Also scrambled or folded?" "Scrambled is fine." "Good, because that's what you're getting." They ate standing up at the kitchen counter, which was not something Adrian typically did in his own kitchen, and then Nora washed the dishes by hand, which was also not something that typically happened in his kitchen, and the clock moved toward 9. At 8:52, Adrian's phone buzzed. Diane Mercer, from the lobby. They were early. He looked at Nora. "Put that down," she said, nodding at his phone, which he'd been gripping. "And don't crouch down to her level right away. It can feel condescending. Let her set the pace." "Okay. And if she doesn't say anything, That's fine. You don't need to fill the silence. Okay? And Adrian, she waited until he looked at her. She might hate you, not because you deserve it in this moment, but because you're the safest target for everything she's feeling right now. If that happens, you don't defend yourself. You just stay. He nodded. I know. Do you? I'm learning. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse foyer. Adrian stood back slightly, letting Nora be closer to the door. Diane Mercer came in first, a professional smile firmly in place, tablet in hand, the careful alertness of someone whose job required constant monitoring. And then, behind her, holding a backpack that was clearly too heavy for her frame and wearing a purple coat that had a small tear on the left sleeve that someone had mended with the wrong color thread. Lily. She was small for 7, or maybe she just seemed small because of the way she was holding herself. Shoulders pulled in, chin slightly down, that particular posture of a child who has learned too early that the world requires defensive positioning. Her hair was dark and curly and slightly tangled on one side, like she'd slept on it wrong and no one had thought to fix it. She was wearing sneakers with a flashing light in the sole that blinked twice when she stepped into the foyer and then went still. She looked up. She had his eyes. Not in the way people say these things as pleasantry or passing resemblance. She had his exact eyes, the particular dark gray of them, the way they were set slightly wide, the way they moved when assessing something. Adrian had seen those eyes in the mirror every morning for 32 years, and he had never once understood what they looked like from the outside until this moment. He didn't say anything. He'd been advised not to fill silences. Lily looked at him. Then she looked at Nora. Then she looked at the kitchen, where the orange juice carton was still on the counter and the colored pencils were laid out in a row. Then she looked back at Adrian. "Are you my dad?" she said. Her voice was flat, not hostile, not warm, flat in the way that children get when they are working very hard to protect something inside themselves. "Yes," Adrian said. "I am." Lily considered this for what felt like a long time. "My mom said you didn't know about me," she said. "She said it wasn't your fault." Adrian's throat tightened. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected Claire to have covered for him with their daughter, with this girl who had been raised without him, and apparently raised with a version of events that was kinder than the truth. "Your mom was—" He stopped, started again. "Your mom told you something true. I didn't know about you for a long time." A pause. "But I also didn't do everything I could have done to know. And that's on me, not on her, not on you." Lily absorbed this. Her expression didn't change much, but something behind the flatness shifted very slightly. "She died," Lily said. "Just stated it. The way children sometimes state the unbearable things, directly, because they haven't yet learned the social conventions that teach us to soften them." "I know," Adrian said. "I'm sorry. Did you know her before?" "A long time ago, yes." "Did you love her?" The question landed like something physical. Diane Mercer made a small movement, not quite intervening, just hovering. Adrian didn't look away from Lily. "I did," he said. "In the way I knew how to, back then. I didn't do a very good job of showing it." Lily looked at him for another long moment. Then she looked at Nora. "Who are you?" she said. Nora sat down on the floor. Not on a chair. On the actual floor of the foyer, cross-legged, bringing herself to Lily's level without making a production of it. "I'm Nora. I'm Adrian's... We're together. Which means, if you end up living here, you'd be living with me too." She paused. "I know that's a lot of new people all at once." Lily looked at the floor. "Ms. Carter at the Foster house smells like the soap from the dispenser at school." "That's a strong smell," Nora agreed. "It gives me a headache." "That would give me a headache too." Lily looked at the colored pencils visible in the kitchen. "Are those for me?" "They're available," Nora said, "if you want them." Lily took 3 steps toward the kitchen. Then she stopped and looked back at Adrian, like she was checking whether there was a rule she was missing. "It's your house too," Adrian said. "You can go wherever you want." She didn't respond to that, But she went into the kitchen and stood in front of the colored pencils and looked at them carefully, considering colors the way children do when they are very serious about such things. Diane Mercer appeared at Adrian's elbow. "That went better than most initial introductions," she murmured. "She's been very—" She glanced at Lily and lowered her voice further. "She's been very controlled since her mother passed. The grief counselor thinks she's holding a great deal." "What does she need?" Nora asked, from where she'd stood up behind them. "Consistency," Diane said immediately. "Routine. The same things happening in the same order every day. Children who've experienced loss like this, what they need most is to believe that the people around them are going to keep showing up." Nora nodded once, like that was exactly what she'd expected to hear. Lily had selected a blue pencil and was looking at the sketch pad. She looked up at Adrian. "Can I draw in here?" "Yes," he said. "You can draw wherever you want." She pulled out a stool at the kitchen island, climbed up onto it with some effort. The stool was a little tall for her, and opened the sketch pad. Adrian stood in his own kitchen and watched his daughter draw, and the silence that followed was not comfortable exactly, but it was real. It was a start. The first visit lasted 2 hours. Diane stayed for all of it, tablet in hand, taking the particular kind of notes that child welfare workers take. Observations of interaction quality, of emotional tone, of the small specific details that get translated later into official assessments and filed in official systems that would determine the shape of Lily's life. Lily drew the entire time. She drew a house with a tree in front of it, then the tree by itself, then something that might have been a cat or might have been a very abstract interpretation of weather. She didn't talk much. She accepted orange juice when Nora offered it without saying thank you, but when she was leaving, coat back on, too heavy backpack reattached, she paused at the door and held up the drawing she'd done of the tree. She looked at Adrian. "You can keep this one," she said. "If you want." He took it carefully. "Thank you, Lily." She studied him for a second. Then she went to the elevator with Diane without looking back. Adrian stood in the foyer holding a crayon drawing of a tree. Behind him, Nora said very quietly, "Don't cry in the hallway. Wait until they're gone." He laughed, an involuntary sound, surprised out of him. "I'm not. You're about to." He wasn't going to argue the point. The days that followed had a rhythm that was new and uncomfortable and necessary, the way new and uncomfortable and necessary things often run together. Marcus had moved quickly. The marriage license had required navigating several layers of paperwork under expedited circumstances, which Marcus handled with the cheerful efficiency of a man who had spent 30 years making complicated things happen on short timelines. They were married 10 days after the custody hearing, quietly, in the office of a notary in Midtown, with Marcus and one of Nora's colleagues from the community center as witnesses. Nora wore the only dress she owned that wasn't a work uniform. Dark green, simple, and Adrian wore a suit he hadn't planned for this occasion. There were no flowers. There were no vows that anyone had written. They signed the documents the notary put in front of them, and then they stood outside the building in the November cold, and Nora said, "Okay, that's done." And Adrian said, That's done." And then they went their separate ways for the rest of the afternoon because there was nothing else to do. He kept thinking about what she had told him in his kitchen, about why she'd said yes, about being one of the people who shows up. Lily's visits continued under supervision, every other day for the first 2 weeks, 2 hours each time. Diane Mercer was always there with her clipboard, noting how Adrian and Lily interacted, noting the quality of the space, noting whether things looked staged or genuine. She was very good at her job. She was very good at detecting the difference. The first week was hard in a way Adrian hadn't been prepared for. Lily was cooperative in the technical sense. She came, she sat, she accepted food and orange juice and sketch pads, but she had erected around herself a very effective wall made of politeness and distance, and nothing Adrian did seemed to find a crack in it. He asked her about school. She gave one-sentence answers. He asked her what she liked to draw. She shrugged. He showed her different rooms of the penthouse, trying to make the space feel like something other than a billboard for his own wealth, and she moved through them with the careful attention of a child who is studying an environment for potential danger. On the 4th day, she told him, in the same flat tone she'd used to tell him about Ms. Carter's soap, that her mother had let her put stickers on her bedroom door. "Which stickers?" he asked. All of them, Lily said. There were a lot. She said doors were for stickers and windows were for looking out of. She paused. She had a rule about that. That sounds like a good rule, Adrian said. Lily looked at the door of the room they were using as her provisional space. Bare, tasteful, the same design language as the rest of the apartment. This door doesn't have stickers, she observed. No, he agreed. We could fix that. You'd really let me put stickers on it? It's your door. She was quiet for a moment. Miss Mercer says I might come live here for real soon. She's right. There's an evaluation happening. I know what an evaluation is, Lily said, with a slight edge that was the first truly Lily-like sound he'd heard from her. Direct and a little impatient, not calibrated for anyone else's comfort. They did one at the Foster house, too. She looked at him. Do you actually want me here? Or is it because you have to? The question arrived with the particular precision that 7-year-olds occasionally achieve, the kind of accuracy that has no performance in it, that is just the plain shape of what they actually need to know. Both, Adrian said, because lying seemed like exactly the wrong response to exactly that question. At first it was because I had to figure out how to do the right thing, but the more time I spend with you, the more it's because I want to. Lily considered him. That's a weird answer. I know, but it's true. She looked at the door again. I'm going to need a lot of stickers, she said, like a really embarrassing amount. I can manage that, Adrian said. The first actual smile, small, guarded, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth, happened and disappeared so quickly that he almost missed it. He didn't. Nora's presence in this penthouse had become a daily constant in a way that had happened naturally, without being formally arranged. She had her own apartment, a 2-bedroom in Harlem that she'd lived in for 6 years, that she had not given up and was not going to give up. But she showed up at the penthouse most mornings before Lily's visits, and most evenings when there were visits in the afternoon, and she had gradually, without asking permission or announcing what she was doing, begun to change the apartment. Not dramatically. Not in the way that required contractors or designers. But the Fente painting stayed down. She brought over several framed photographs, not Adrian's things, but her own. Pictures from her mother's apartment, a print of something she'd found at a street fair, a small mounted drawing that one of the elderly residents at the assisted living facility had made and pressed into her hands on her last Friday volunteering. She put them in the hallway at ordinary eye level, the kind of height where you'd actually look at them. She rearranged the furniture in the room designated as Lily's so that the bed was against the wall. Children feel safer when there's something solid behind them, she told Adrian, and he did not ask how she knew that. And she ordered a bedside lamp that had a soft orange glow rather than the clinical white of the overhead lighting. She also continued working. This was the thing that most surprised Adrian in those early weeks. Not because he'd expected her to stop, but because of how she managed it. She rescheduled shifts, covered gaps in her schedule with the same practical flexibility she brought to everything else, and declined, consistently and without drama, any suggestion from Adrian that she could simply stop working if money was no longer the concern. It's not about money, she said on the one occasion when he made the suggestion directly. I know, but do you? She looked at him over the rim of the coffee she'd made herself in his kitchen. She'd brought her own brand of coffee, a detail he found both entirely Nora and completely reasonable. The people at the grocery store have my number. 3 of the residents at Ashford House specifically ask for me on Fridays. I'm not going to disappear from their lives because I moved into a building with a doorman. I wasn't suggesting you disappear, he said. I was suggesting you might have more time. For what exactly? He didn't have a good answer for that. Adrian, she said not unkindly, you hired me in a sense to help you build a home for Lily. I can do that and still be a person who does other things. In fact, I think it's better if I do. She paused. Children need to see adults who work, who have lives that extend beyond the 4 walls of whatever home they're in. It teaches them that the world is bigger than the immediate environment. Where do you get this information? He asked. Not sarcastically, genuinely. I was raised by someone who worked 2 jobs and still made dinner most nights, she said, and I paid attention. The home evaluation happened on the 19th day of the provisional placement. A different social worker from Diane, a man named Gerald Okafor, who was thorough in a different way, more interested in the physical space, in documentation, in the structural evidence of a child-ready home, walked through every room with the methodical attention of someone who had spent years learning exactly what to look for and exactly what the difference was between a space that looked prepared for a child and one that actually was. He spent 8 minutes in Lily's room. Adrian stood in the doorway and tried not to read Gerald's expression, and failed completely. He spent 12 minutes in the kitchen, looking in the refrigerator, which now contained actual food, eggs, and orange juice, and the brand of apple sauce that Nora had discovered Lily would accept without negotiation, checking the cabinet where they'd put the cups Lily used and the plates with the plain white rim that she preferred to the ones with a pattern. When he was done, Gerald sat at the kitchen table with his report and made notes in a way that communicated nothing about what those notes contained. "Mr. Cross," he said, looking up eventually, "how has the adjustment been for you personally? Not for Lily, for you." Adrian thought about the truthful answer. "Harder than I expected," he said. I thought I could approach it the same way I approach problems at work. Identify the objective, allocate the resources, execute." He paused. "That's not how it works." "What's different?" "She's a person," Adrian said. It came out more simply than he intended, without the eloquence he was used to applying to things. She has opinions about the color of her plate and the height of her pillow and whether the orange juice has been in the refrigerator long enough to be the right temperature. She misses her mother in ways that are specific and particular and that I can't fix by throwing money at anything. He paused. "I can't fix them at all. I can just be here while she figures out how to carry them." Gerald looked at him for a moment, wrote something down. "And Ms. Hayes," he said, "how would you characterize her role in this household?" Adrian thought about Nora showing up at 6:30 in the morning with grocery bags. Nora sitting on the floor of the foyer so she wouldn't tower over a frightened child. Nora rearranging furniture so a little girl's bed would have something solid behind it. "She's the reason any of this works," he said. "I can provide the material things. Nora knows how to make a place feel like home." Gerald made another note. His expression remained carefully neutral, which told Adrian nothing except that the man was very good at his job. The written assessment arrived 4 days later. Gerald recommended transition to full-time placement, contingent on a follow-up review in 60 days. The language was measured, official, the particular careful prose of child welfare documentation, but the recommendation was clear. Lily could come. When Adrian told her they were sitting in the kitchen, she'd taken to doing her drawings there, at the island, which meant that there were now colored pencil drawings in various stages of completion accumulated along the counter's edge. She was working on something that involved a large quantity of yellow, which she'd told him was a sun, but which had evolved over the course of the afternoon into something more complex. "Really?" she said. Not excited, just checking. "Really? Your room will be yours. You can put up as many stickers as you want." Lily looked at her drawing. "I want to bring my mom's stuff," she said. She had a jewelry box, and her books, and there's a photo in a frame that was in the kitchen. She paused. "It was us. On a trip we took before she got sick the first time, she always kept it in the kitchen because she said that was where people spend the most time." "We'll get all of it," Adrian said. "Everything." Lily dragged the yellow pencil across the page slowly. "She would have thought this was pretty crazy," she said. "Me living here." "Yeah?" She would have said. Lily did a small, unconscious impression of a voice, slightly lower, slightly more measured than her own. "Well, Lily Bean, life is full of curveballs." She dropped the voice. That's what she said about things that surprised her. Curveballs. "She sounds like she was smart," Adrian said carefully. "She was the smartest person I ever met," Lily said with simple, total conviction. "But she couldn't always open the jar of pickles. She had to get the neighbor to do it." A pause. "Mr. Delgado. He had really strong hands. That's a useful quality." She said everyone has one really useful quality if you look hard enough. Lily added some more yellow. "I don't know what yours is yet." "That's fair," Adrian said. "I don't know what mine is either." Lily thought about this. "You're very good at standing in one place when you're nervous," she said. "Like you don't move at all. I noticed that." He looked at her. "That's very specific." "My mom said specific is better than vague." She looked up briefly. "What's my useful quality?" "You notice things," he said. "Most people don't notice things the way you do. That's actually a remarkable quality." Lily looked at him for a second, and this time the expression on her face was more complicated. Not quite the guarded flatness she'd maintained for weeks, not quite trust, but something in between, something that had no name except that it was the beginning of something, the very first edge of it. "Okay," she said, and went back to her drawing. Nora was in the hallway when Adrian came out of the kitchen. She'd been there, he realized, for at least part of the conversation, not eavesdropping exactly, just present, the way she was often present, nearby without being intrusive, available without insisting on being needed. She looked at him. "She's going to be okay," Nora said, quietly. Not as reassurance, not as prediction, just as something she believed. "I know," he said, and realized, with some surprise, that he believed it too. What he was less certain about, what kept arriving in the back of his mind at odd moments, in the early morning when he was still half asleep and the apartment was quiet, or late at night when Nora had gone back to Harlem and he was alone with the city spread out below him, was whether he was going to be okay. Whether the version of himself that had built the empire and managed the acquisitions and kept everything at the controllable distance of professional excellence was capable of the thing that Lily actually needed from him. The thing that Nora, apparently, already knew how to do without effort. He thought about Claire. He thought about 43 messages and a cracked phone screen and the particular moral convenience of not reading something if you could tell yourself you didn't know it existed. He thought about what Claire had told Lily, that it wasn't his fault, that he hadn't known, and felt the weight of that generosity, how much it cost a woman to do that for a man who hadn't earned it, even after he was gone from her life, even at the end. He put the drawing Lily had given him on his first visit, the tree, slightly lopsided, done in green and brown crayon, up on the wall next to the phone case drawing. The two drawings looked entirely out of place in the apartment, and entirely right. He was going to have to live with things that didn't fit neatly, things that couldn't be curated or optimized or managed at arm's length. That was as far as Adrian Cross could tell the actual work, not the legal proceedings or the financial arrangements or even the geography of where everyone slept. The work was this: standing in a kitchen while a 7-year-old draws a sun that has evolved into something more complicated than a sun, and saying nothing, and being there, and doing that again the next day and the day after that, until being there stops being a thing you choose and becomes simply a thing you are. He was a long way from that, but for the first time in a long time, he was at least moving in the right direction. Lily moved in on a Tuesday. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a garbage bag. The garbage bag was not because anyone had been careless with her belongings. It was because she had insisted on packing the last things herself, the things from the foster placement that were hers and only hers. And the only bag immediately available had been a black garbage bag from Ms. Carter's kitchen, and Lily had apparently decided that was fine, that the container didn't matter as long as the contents were correct. Adrian watched her drag it off the elevator and thought, "This child has more dignity than most adults I know." Nora was already there. She'd come early again. It was becoming the rhythm of her, this habit of arriving before things happened, of being present in the space before anyone else, so that when they arrived, it already felt inhabited. She had made hot chocolate, the real kind, the kind you make on the stove with actual milk, a recipe she'd mentioned once her mother used to make on cold mornings. The apartment smelled like it when the elevator opened. Lily stepped into the foyer and stopped, sniffed once. "That smells like my mom's kitchen," she said. She said it to no one in particular, or maybe to the air, and then she picked up her garbage bag and walked toward her room like she had somewhere to be. Adrian looked at Nora. Nora looked back at him with an expression that said clearly, "Don't make a thing of it." So he didn't. Lily's room had been transformed over the preceding week. The stickers had arrived. He'd ordered an assortment on her request, and the assortment had turned out to mean 430 individual stickers in approximately every category: animals and planets, and cartoon food and geometric shapes, and one sheet that was inexplicably only pictures of different kinds of cheese. Lily had applied them to her door with the methodical focus of a conservator restoring something irreplaceable, and the door now looked like the inside of a very specific and wonderful mind. The jewelry box from Claire's apartment sat on the dresser. The framed photograph, Claire and Lily at a beach somewhere, both of them squinting into the sun, Lily, maybe 4 years old, laughing at something out of frame, was on the nightstand, exactly where Lily had specified. The lamp with the orange glow was on. The bed was against the wall. Lily set her garbage bag on the floor. She looked at the room for a long time. Then she sat down on the bed and picked up the framed photo and held it in her lap. Adrian stood in the doorway and didn't say anything. After a moment, he went back to the kitchen. "Give her a few minutes," Nora said, without turning from the stove. "I know." "You were about to go back in there." "I wasn't." "You had the look." "What look?" Nora handed him a mug of hot chocolate. "The look you get when you think something needs to be fixed and you're calculating the fastest route to fixing it." She poured one for herself. "Some things don't need fixing. Some things need time." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "I know that." "You know it intellectually. You're still learning it in your body." She took a sip. "Most people are." They stood in the kitchen together for 6 or 7 minutes, which was long enough for the silence to stop being uncomfortable and start being something else. Outside the windows, the city was doing its November thing. Gray sky, bare trees in the park far below, the kind of day that felt truncated, like it hadn't fully committed to happening. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was still in her coat. "Can I have some of that?" she asked. "That's why I made it," Nora said. Lily climbed onto the stool at the island and accepted the mug with both hands and drank it with the concentration of someone for whom the specific act of drinking something warm was, in this moment, serious work. Adrian watched his daughter sit in his kitchen and drink hot chocolate and look out the window at a city she had grown up in but was experiencing from an entirely different angle than she ever had before. He thought about Claire at 24, in her Brooklyn apartment, making the decision to keep a baby whose father had stopped answering his phone. He thought about what it must have been like to raise Lily alone, to be both anchor and sail for a child who clearly had her own strong opinions about things, who noticed specific details and held them with care, who had packed her most important possessions in a garbage bag with complete dignity. He thought, Claire did that. Claire made her. It was not a comfortable thought, and he sat with it anyway. The first real problem arrived 8 days later. It arrived in the form of a phone call from Lily's school. Not her new school, the one they'd enrolled her in 3 blocks from the apartment, but her old school in Brooklyn where she'd been for 2 years, where her teacher was calling because she was concerned and because the records transfer had flagged her as a student who might need additional support during a transition period, and because Mrs. Ambrose was apparently the kind of teacher who called even when it wasn't technically her job anymore. Adrian took the call in his office. "Mr. Cross," Mrs. Ambrose said. She had a voice like a person who has spent 25 years managing classrooms, authoritative and warm in equal measure. "I want to be honest with you. I'm calling because I care about Lily, not because I have any official role here anymore. But I've been teaching long enough to know when a child is carrying something that's going to come out one way or another." "What do you mean?" "Lily never cried when she was in my class. Not once. Not when she scraped her knee, not when another student said something unkind, not when her mother had to call and say she'd be late for pickup. I always thought she was just stoic, you know. Some kids are." A pause. "But I've been thinking about her since I heard about Claire, and I think now that Lily learned very young not to fall apart in front of other people, because her mother needed her to be okay." Adrian was quiet. "That's a heavy thing for a 7-year-old to carry," Mrs. Ambrose said. "She may seem fine. She may seem very fine, almost unnaturally fine, and that's the thing to watch, because the not crying eventually finds somewhere to go." He thanked her. He sat at his desk for a while after the call. Then he went to find Nora. She was in Lily's room helping Lily organize her books on the shelf they'd put up. Lily had strong opinions about the ordering system, which was neither alphabetical nor by size, but by some internal logic of her own that involved both color and what she described as which ones need to be close to each other. "The green ones go together," Lily was saying, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious to a person who is almost getting it. "Not because they're green, because they have the same feeling." "What feeling?" Nora asked, genuinely. "Like, when you're reading them, you feel like you're in a big open space. even if the story is sad. Lily held up 2 books. These both do that. Okay, Nora said. Same shelf. Adrian stood in the doorway and watched for a moment. Then he went back to the kitchen. He told Nora about the call that evening after Lily was in bed. They were sitting at the kitchen island with what had become their end-of-day habit, something warm to drink, the low light, the city dark outside. Nora listened without interrupting. Mrs. Ambrose thinks she's going to break eventually, Adrian said. That she's been holding it together for so long that… Mrs. Ambrose is right, Nora said. How do we… We don't manage it. We just make sure that when it happens somewhere safe. She turned her mug slowly. She needs to know that falling apart won't break anything, that the people around her won't disappear if she loses it. She's never seen me lose it, Adrian said. I mean, I'm not generally… That might actually be part of the problem, Nora said. She grew up watching her mother hold everything together because there was no other option. If everyone around her is always composed, she's going to conclude that composure is the price of being loved. Adrian looked at her. You're saying I should… I'm not prescribing anything. I'm saying that children figure out the rules of a household by watching the adults in it. If the rule here is that we don't show difficulty, she'll enforce that rule on herself harder than anyone else. He thought about this. I don't know how to be… I'm not good at… I know. I've spent 15 years learning to be the person who doesn't flinch. I know, Nora said again, not impatiently. That's something you're going to have to unlearn, slowly, in front of a 7-year-old. She finally looked up at him. Welcome to the terrifying part. The terrifying part turned out to be a Thursday morning in early December. Lily had been at the new school for 2 weeks. By all external measures, the transition was proceeding within normal parameters. She'd found a seat at a lunch table. She'd completed her assignments. Her new teacher, Ms. Park, had sent home a note saying that Lily was settling in quietly and seemed to be a thoughtful student. Normal parameters. Adrian was in his home office on a conference call when he heard it. It was not a loud sound. That was the thing. It was not the kind of sound that announces itself. It was small, muffled, the sound of something being pressed against something else to muffle it further. He almost didn't hear it over the call. He almost missed it entirely. He ended the call. The sound was coming from Lily's room. He stood in the hallway outside her door for a moment. The stickers on the door, the planets, the animals, the inexplicable cheese, looked back at him. He knocked. Nothing. Lily. He paused. I'm going to come in, okay? He opened the door. She was on the floor on the far side of the bed, in the space between the bed and the wall that she had apparently designated as somewhere that was specifically hers. He'd noticed she went there sometimes, had assumed she was drawing. She was not drawing. She was sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest and her face pressed into them, and she was crying in the way that someone cries when they have been trying very hard not to cry and have finally lost the fight. She looked up when he came in. Her expression did the thing. The automatic reorganization, the pulling back toward composure that Mrs. Ambrose had described. I'm fine, she said. I know, he said. He crossed the room and sat down on the floor next to her, his back against the wall, same as hers. He had on a suit because he'd had calls all morning and hadn't changed, which was a strange thing to be wearing while sitting on the floor of a child's bedroom. But he didn't think about that. Lily looked at him sideways. You're going to ask what's wrong. No, he said. She looked at him differently. You don't have to tell me, he said. You don't have to be fine either. You can just be however you are. Lily's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together hard, the way people do when they are fighting their own face. It was her birthday, she said very quietly. Today. My mom's. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. He had not known that. He should have known that. Ms. Park did this thing at school today, Lily continued. She asked everyone to say something good about their family, and I didn't know what to… She stopped. I didn't know if I should say my mom or you and I didn't say anything, and Ms. Park looked at me like she felt sorry for me, and I hate when people look like that. Yeah, Adrian said. That look is awful. You know it? I've had it aimed at me a few times. Lily was quiet for a moment. What did you do? Usually I got annoyed and then I went and worked very hard at something to prove that I didn't need anyone's sympathy. He paused. That was not always the healthiest approach. Lily almost laughed. It came out as a small, wet, involuntary sound. Nora says you work too much. Nora's right about most things. She said you use work the same way some people use TV, to not have to think about the hard stuff. Adrian made a mental note to have a conversation with Nora about the content of her conversations with Lily, and then immediately abandoned the mental note because Nora was in fact correct, and the observation was accurate and probably useful for Lily to hear from someone. She's not wrong, he said. Lily pulled her knees closer. I miss my mom, she said. And there it was. The plain shape of it, the uncomplicated center of everything, the thing that had been looking for a crack in the wall for weeks and had finally found one. I miss her every day. I miss the way she smelled, and I miss how she always burned toast a little bit, even when she was trying really hard not to, and I miss the way she did voices when she read out loud. Her voice had gone thick and uneven. And I'm here, and it's okay here. It's better than the foster house, but it's not her. No, Adrian said. It's not. She should be here, Lily said. She should be the one who's here. He didn't say anything to that, because there was nothing to say to it. He just stayed where he was, back against the wall, on the floor of his daughter's room, with its stickered door and its framed photo on the nightstand and the orange glow of the lamp, and let the thing be what it was. After a while, Lily's breathing evened out. She leaned, very slightly, almost imperceptibly, to the left, until her shoulder was touching his arm. Just that. A small contact, a small allowance. He stayed very still so she wouldn't notice she'd done it and pull back. They sat there for a long time. Eventually, Lily said, You're not going to tell me it gets easier? I have no idea if it gets easier, Adrian said. I haven't had nearly as much practice losing someone as you have. People keep saying it gets easier. People say that because they don't know what else to say, and silence feels unkind. Lily thought about this. My mom used to say that missing someone was just love with nowhere to go. She paused. I thought that was kind of dumb when she said it, but I think I understand it now. Adrian felt something shift in the vicinity of his chest, the particular kind of shift that doesn't have a clean emotional name. She said smart things, he said. Yeah. A beat. She said dumb things, too. She got really into a podcast about crystals for like 3 months. She bought a lot of crystals. We had them everywhere. Did they work? No, she donated them eventually. Lily's voice had changed slightly. Still sad, but something else mixed in now, something that was the specific texture of memory, of a person starting to access the full shape of what they're grieving, rather than just the fact of it. She was really bad at parallel parking, like genuinely terrible. She'd just keep going back and forth until someone honked. A pause. She made incredible soup, though, from scratch, like she'd invented it. I don't know the recipe. We could try to figure it out, Adrian said, if you remember what it tasted like. Lily looked up at him. You cook? No, but Nora does. Lily seemed to consider this seriously. It had lemons in it and something green, and it smelled like the kitchen right before Thanksgiving. That's a start. A pause. Okay, Lily said with the particular finality of a child closing one chapter and opening the next. She unfolded herself, stood up, and looked down at him still sitting on the floor in his suit. You look kind of ridiculous sitting there, she said. I'm aware. You can get up. He got up. His back made a sound it had never made before that suggested sitting on floors in your 30s was a thing with physical consequences. Lily noticed. Did your back just... We don't have to discuss it. That was loud. Lily. She was almost smiling, not quite, but the territory of almost. Thank you, she said, quietly, not looking at him. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said, with a small edge of her particular directness. I'm doing it anyway. Nora arrived at 4 that afternoon, and Adrian told her in the kitchen, in a low voice, about the morning. He told her about sitting on the floor, and about the soup, and about Lily's shoulder against his arm. Nora listened with her full attention the way she always did.
And when he finished, she said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "How are you?" "I'm fine." "Adrian." He stopped. The question had caught him unprepared, which it had been designed to do. Nora had a way of deploying simple questions as precision instruments. He tried again. "I felt useless. Sitting there. I couldn't fix anything. You weren't supposed to fix anything. I know, but I'm not used to being useless, being present without a function," he said. "Is that the same thing?" "Not quite, but it's adjacent." She looked at him steadily. "You sat on the floor with her. You let her say what she needed to say without trying to solve it. Do you understand how many adults can't do that? How rare that actually is?" "I didn't do it well." "You did it. That's what counts." He thought about what Mrs. Ambrose had said, about the not crying finding somewhere to go. "She cried," he said. "First time since she moved in." Nora nodded slowly. "Good." "Good?" She felt safe enough to fall apart. "That's not nothing, Adrian. That's actually a great deal." He stood with that for a moment. Let it land somewhere real. Then the front door buzzed. Lily's new school had a pickup club 3 days a week, and she'd been dropped at the lobby. Adrian buzzed her up, and they both listened to the elevator arrive and the doors open and the sound of a backpack hitting the floor of the foyer and sneakers on the floor. Lily appeared in the kitchen. She looked at both of them. Then she looked at the stove. "Are we going to try the soup?" she asked. "Today?" Nora asked. "You said you cook." Lily looked at Nora directly. "Right?" "I do." "Then can we try today?" She set her backpack down more carefully. "I've been thinking about it. I remember it had celery, I'm pretty sure. And the green stuff was probably parsley because she grew parsley in a pot on the window." Nora looked at the stove, then at Lily. Then she took off her coat. "Okay," she said. "Let's see what we can do." What followed was an hour and 40 minutes of concentrated and frequently incorrect soup making. They were working from Lily's memory, which was specific in some places and entirely approximate in others. And the first version came out too salty and the second too thin, and Lily at one point declared with complete authority that it was wrong, and then 5 minutes later admitted that actually the thin version was closer. And it was the kind of productive chaos that hadn't previously existed in Adrian's kitchen, where things got spilled, and there was disagreement about the quantity of lemon, and Lily stood on a stool to reach the counter and narrated the process with running commentary on everything they were doing wrong. At some point, Adrian stopped watching and started helping, which mostly meant stirring things when directed and being wrong about the amount of parsley. And at some point after that, all three of them were in the kitchen together, and it wasn't an arrangement or a performance, but just a thing that was happening, the ordinary alchemy of people sharing a space and a task. The third version of the soup was close. Lily said so with considerable judgment in her voice, like she was scoring something. "It's not exactly right," she said, "but it has the smell." "We can get closer," Nora said. "Yeah." Lily looked at her bowl. She would have made fun of us for needing 3 tries. "She sounds like she would have been fun to cook with," Nora said. Lily thought about this. She was really bad at cooking, actually. The soup was like the one thing she could do. She stirred it slowly. "She made it for me when I was sick, every time, even in summer." She was quiet. It tasted like being okay." No one said anything for a moment. "Then we'll keep working on it," Nora said, "until we get it right." Lily nodded. She ate her soup. The kitchen was warm and smelled like lemon and parsley, and something that was not quite Claire's recipe but was heading in its direction. The weeks around the soup were also the weeks when Adrian began to understand something about Nora that he hadn't fully understood before. He'd known, in the abstract way you know things about people you've agreed to share a life with on short notice, that she was competent and practical and possessed of a moral clarity that he found simultaneously reassuring and mildly humbling. What he hadn't known, what emerged slowly in the specific dailiness of living in adjacent spaces and sharing a child's adjustments and eating breakfast across a counter from each other, was how much Nora worked to maintain herself. She was not fine all the time. He realized this gradually, through accumulated small evidence. She went quiet sometimes in the evenings. Not sad, not troubled,
just retreated. He learned not to mistake the quiet for distance. She had a temper, controlled but real, that surfaced when she was tired and something went wrong that was preventable. A dropped ball on Lily's school paperwork, a miscommunication about pickup that left Lily waiting an extra 12 minutes. She didn't blow up. She got precise and sharp-edged in a way that was more effective than blowing up, and then she fixed the problem, and then she let it go. She cried once. Adrian almost missed it. He'd come into the kitchen at 6 in the morning, and she was standing at the counter, and she was very still, and her eyes were red, and she was looking at her phone with the particular expression of someone who has just read something that hit somewhere old and deep. Nora. She looked up. Didn't hide it, didn't perform composure. One of the residents at Ashford House passed last night. Mr. Kowalski. He was 91. She set the phone down. He used to save the sports section of the newspaper for me every Friday. He didn't care about sports, he just knew I did. I'm sorry. He was 91 and had a full life, she said, and her voice only fractured slightly. But he was kind. He was consistently kind. Some people spend their whole lives being consistently kind, and nobody makes a big deal of it because it's not dramatic. And then they're gone and you realize how much. She stopped. Adrian did what he'd learned to do, which was not fill the silence. After a moment, Nora picked up her coffee. You never knew him, she said. Sorry, you don't need to. Tell me about him, Adrian said. She looked at him. Tell me about Mr. Kowalski, he said. So she did. She stood in his kitchen at 6 in the morning and told him about a 91-year-old man who saved sports sections and had opinions about the designated hitter rule and had once worked as a shipping mechanic in Hoboken and had 3 daughters who visited on alternating Sundays and who had held Nora's hand once when she was having a difficult day and said, without preamble, "You're doing better than you think you are." She told it the way she told things. Specific, no decoration, no performing of emotion, but not hiding it either. When she was done, she finished her coffee. Thank you, she said, and seemed to mean it. I didn't do anything. You asked, she said. That's the whole thing, most of the time. He thought about that for a long time afterward. You ask. That's the whole thing. He'd spent so long in rooms full of people who wanted things from him, investment, attention, decision, approval, that he'd forgotten, or maybe never fully learned, that asking was something you could give a person. That genuine curiosity about someone's experience was a form of care that cost you almost nothing and meant almost everything. He thought about Claire. 43 messages. Not once had he asked what she was going through. He was done thinking about the past in the way that lets you off the hook by calling it the past. It was part of him. The decisions lived in the present because their consequences were standing in his kitchen, making soup, and putting stickers on doors, and carrying the particular grief of a 7-year-old who had loved her mother ferociously and lost her too soon. He was going to have to be better, not in the abstract, specifically. One Tuesday at a time. The 60-day review arrived in the second week of January. Gerald Okafor returned with his clipboard. Diane Mercer came with him. They spent 2 hours in the apartment speaking with Lily separately and with Adrian and Nora separately, and then all together, and the whole thing had the quality of a performance review conducted on the subject of your own family, which it essentially was. When they were done, Gerald sat at the kitchen table again and made his notes again. Lily has requested, he said, with the particular care of someone reading from official documentation, that she be permitted to remain in this placement on a permanent basis. He looked up. She specified, and I'm quoting here, that she still misses her mom and still feels mad sometimes that you weren't there before. She wanted me to make sure that was included. Adrian said, that should be included. She also said, and again I'm quoting directly, that it's the first place she's felt safe since her mom died. Gerald paused. In my professional assessment, the home environment is appropriate. The child's emotional needs are being met, and both adults present are demonstrably engaged in the child's well-being. He closed the folder. I'll be filing a recommendation for extended placement pending permanent custody review. Diane Mercer looked at Adrian. It's a process, she said, but you're on the right road. After they left, Lily came out of her room. She had been drawing while the adults talked, and she had the colored pencil still in her hand, orange, which she'd been favoring lately. She looked at Adrian and Nora. "Did they say I can stay?" she asked. "For now, yes," Adrian said. "We're still working on making it permanent." Lily absorbed this. "How long does that take?" "A while." "But I can stay while we're waiting." "Yes." She looked at the orange pencil, then she looked at him. "Okay, I have a question, and I want you to answer it honestly." "Okay," he said. "Do you actually want to be my dad?" she said. "Not because you have to, because you want to." He thought about what she'd asked him on the fourth day, about whether he actually wanted her there. He thought about how he'd answered. The honest answer, both, because it was true and lying would have been immediately detectable by a child who noticed everything. He thought about Lily's shoulder leaning against his arm on the floor of her bedroom. He thought, the truest answer I have is still not as full as the answer she deserves. But it's fuller than it was. "Yes," he said, "I want to be your dad. It terrifies me because I'm not sure I know how to do it right. But yes." Lily considered him for a long moment with those gray eyes that were identical to his. "Okay," she said. "You can practice." She went back to her room. Adrian stood in the kitchen, and Nora was watching him with the quiet, particular attention she'd had from the very first morning. And the January light was coming in flat and clear through the windows. And somewhere in the apartment, a 7-year-old girl was drawing something in orange that he wouldn't see until she decided to show him. He didn't know what came next. He did not have a plan that extended beyond the next week, which was possibly the first time in 15 years he had been without a plan that extended beyond the next quarter. He found, unexpectedly, that he could live with it. The permanent custody hearing was scheduled for the first week of March. Marcus had been working toward it since January, building the file, coordinating with Diane Mercer and Gerald Okafor, preparing the documentation that would go before Judge Voss, school records, home evaluations, Lily's statements, the evidence of the ordinary and the consistent that constituted, in the language of family court, a stable home environment. Adrian had signed everything put in front of him and answered every question asked of him and trusted Marcus to build the legal case, because that was what you paid Marcus Chen to do. What Adrian had not done in all of February was sleep particularly well. The thing about provisional was that it had an expiration date. You could tell yourself that the trajectory was positive, that Gerald's reports had been favorable, that Lily was visibly settling. The stickered door, the soup experiments that had now produced 4 increasingly accurate versions of Claire's recipe. The school where she had found a friend named Priya who also liked to draw and who came over one Saturday afternoon and spent 3 hours with Lily making what they described as a graphic novel about 2 girls who could turn into weather phenomena. You could tell yourself all of that, and it was all true. And it didn't touch the part of your brain that woke you at 3 in the morning with the particular clarity that 3 in the morning produces. Any of this could still go wrong. He hadn't told Nora about the 3 a.m. waking. He told himself it was because she had enough to manage, which was partially true and also a convenient justification for not admitting that he was scared in a way that didn't respond to any of the management techniques he had developed over 15 years of managing things. He found out she already knew on a Wednesday morning in mid-February when she looked at him across the kitchen counter and said, without preamble, "You're not sleeping." "I'm sleeping fine." "You have the look you get when you haven't slept. Your left eye does a thing." "My left eye doesn't. It goes slightly more still than your right, like you're compensating." She poured her coffee. "What's keeping you up?" He looked at her. "The hearing." "The outcome isn't in doubt," Marcus said. Marcus says a lot of things, with a lot of confidence. That's what you pay him for. Adrian set down his mug. "There is a judge who gets to decide whether my daughter stays in my home. There is a process I cannot control, and a timeline I cannot accelerate, and an outcome that is not guaranteed regardless of how favorably things appear to be trending." He paused. "I have spent 15 years making sure that important outcomes don't depend on variables I can't control. This one does. So no, I'm not sleeping particularly well." Nora was quiet for a moment. "Lily asked me yesterday if the hearing meant she might have to leave," she said. Adrian went still. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that we were doing everything we could to make sure she could stay,
and that whatever happened, she was not going to be alone. She looked at him steadily. She asked me if I would leave too, if things changed. What did you tell her? I told her no. No hesitation, no qualification. Adrian looked at her. She needed to hear it, Nora said simply. So I said it. He thought about that for the rest of the morning, the simplicity of it, the complete absence of calculation. She needed to hear it, so I said it. Not because it was strategically optimal or legally advisable or part of any plan, but because a 7-year-old had asked a direct question and deserved a direct answer. He thought about how long it had been since he had operated that way, since his first instinct to a question had been honesty rather than strategy. The fever arrived on a Thursday night in the last week of February. It arrived the way fevers do in children, suddenly and completely, without warning or apology. Lily had been fine at dinner, had eaten most of what was on her plate, and argued mildly with Adrian about whether she needed to finish her broccoli before she could have the apple slices Nora had cut, had lost the argument, and eaten the broccoli with the dignified resignation of someone acceding to an unreasonable authority, and had gone to bed at 8:30 with no indication that anything was wrong. At 11:15, Adrian heard her. The sound was wrong in the way that pulls you out of sleep even when you're not sleeping well to begin with. Not crying, not quite, but a sound with distress at its edge, small and confused. He was out of bed before he was entirely awake. She was sitting up in her bed when he came in, and he could see from the doorway that something was off. The way she was sitting, the unfocused quality of her eyes, the faint high color in her cheeks that was visible even in the low orange light of the lamp. "Hey," he said, moving to her. He sat on the edge of the bed, put his hand on her forehead. She was burning. "My head hurts," she said. Her voice was thick and small and stripped of the self-possession she usually maintained. The particular vulnerability of a sick child, all the careful architecture of composure just gone, dissolved by fever into something much more basic. "I know," he said. "I've got you." He had no idea what he was doing. He knew this with complete clarity as he went to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet and stared at its contents, trying to remember what you gave a 7-year-old for fever, what the dose was, whether the children's Tylenol he was fairly certain Nora had put in here at some point was actually there, and what the correct amount was for a child of Lily's weight. He had never administered medication to a child. He had never been responsible for a sick child. He had, in the full and unsparing inventory of his parental experience, been responsible for Lily for approximately 4 months, most of which had been navigating emotional adjustment rather than anything medical. He found his phone, called Nora. She picked up on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "No hello." She heard it in his voice before he said anything. "Lily has a fever. I don't know. The Tylenol in the cabinet, what's the dose for? How high?" "I don't have a thermometer." A brief pause that he recognized as Nora deciding not to comment on the absence of a thermometer in a household with a child. "How does she seem? Alert? Confused?" "She knew who I was. She said her head hurts." "Check her neck, gently. See if it's stiff." "What?" "Stiff neck with high fever is something to watch. Check it." He went back to Lily's room, phone pressed to his shoulder. She was still sitting up, looking at him with the glassy patience of a child who is too sick to do anything but wait for adults to handle things. "Lily, can you look down? Try to touch your chin to your chest." She did it without difficulty, slow and sleepy. "She can do it," he said into the phone. "Good. That's good." He could hear Nora moving on her end, the particular sounds of someone getting out of bed, moving quickly but without panic. "Children's Tylenol in the cabinet. There should be a purple bottle. The dosing is on the side by weight. She's about 50 pounds, right?" "I think so." "Then it's the second dose listed." "Don't guess. Read the label." A pause and then, "I'm coming." "Nora, it's 11:30. "I'm coming," she said, and that was the end of that conversation. He gave Lily the Tylenol, reading the label 3 times to be certain. She took it with the focused cooperation of a sick child who knows medicine is part of the sequence that leads to feeling better. He got a damp cloth from the bathroom. Not cold, just cool, the way something in the back of his memory suggested, though he wasn't certain where the memory came from, and folded it and put it on her forehead, and Lily closed her eyes and made a small sound that was either discomfort or relief. He couldn't entirely tell. "Are you going to stay?" she asked without opening her eyes. "Yes," he said. "The whole night?" "As long as you need." She didn't say anything to that, but her hand, which had been resting on the blanket, moved a small amount toward him. Not reaching, not grasping, just moving in his direction, 2 inches, the way a person moves toward warmth without quite deciding to. He put his hand over hers. Nora arrived at 12:40. She had taken a cab, still had her coat over her pajamas, had a bag he could see was imperfectly packed. She'd grabbed things in a hurry. She came directly to Lily's room, assessed the situation in about 4 seconds. The damp cloth, Adrian sitting on the edge of the bed, Lily asleep now, and went to get the thermometer she apparently kept in her bag because of course she did. 102.1, she said, reading it quietly. Not dangerous, but not nothing. She went down around midnight. Good. Nora looked at him. He was in the same position he'd been in when she arrived, hand over Lily's hand, still in the clothes he'd apparently put on when he heard Lily and then not changed out of. You gave her the Tylenol at what time? 11:20. Then we check her temp again at 2. If it comes down to under 100, we let her sleep through. If it's still high, we give her another dose. She moved the bag from her shoulder to the floor and sat in the chair Adrian had moved near Lily's bed during the first weeks of visits. A habit, one of those small rearrangements that had simply become part of the room. Go change. Put on actual pajamas or whatever you sleep in. You're not going anywhere. Neither are you, apparently. Correct. She folded her coat over her arm and looked at Lily's sleeping face with the expression she sometimes got when she didn't know he was watching. Not the practical focus she wore like a working tool, but something quieter, something that had more weight to it. He went and changed. When he came back, Nora was sitting with her legs pulled up into the chair and her coat over her like a blanket, and she had turned the overhead light off so the room was just the orange of the lamp, and she was watching Lily breathe in the particular vigilant way of someone who has appointed themselves to keep watch. You should sleep, he said. So should you. One of us should actually sleep so we can function tomorrow. We'll take turns, she said. Sit down, Adrian. You can take the floor if the chair's not going to work. He sat on the floor, his back against the wall, which was where he'd sat on the day Lily cried, and which had apparently become his specific position in this room when things were hard. For a while, neither of them said anything. Lily breathed. The city made its nighttime sounds 42 floors below. The lamp did its orange thing. Tell me something, Nora said quietly. What? Anything. Something I don't know. He thought about it. I learned to cook exactly one thing when I was 23, he said. Pasta with olive oil and garlic. My first apartment had a kitchen the size of a closet, and I ate that same thing probably 4 times a week for 2 years. Why pasta? It was the only thing I couldn't ruin. Everything else I tried, I found a way to destroy. But pasta, you just have to not leave on the stove too long and not burn the garlic, and you get something edible. Do you still make it? I haven't made it in years. I have a chef. You should make it again sometime. I haven't needed to. That's not the point of cooking something, Nora said. Needing to isn't the point. He looked at her in the low light. She was watching Lily, her face in profile, and he was struck, not for the first time, but more acutely than usual, by the strangeness of the situation they had built. This woman he had called out of nowhere, this stranger he had asked to marry him before he knew the sound of her laugh or how she took her coffee or that she kept a thermometer in her bag. They had constructed a shared life out of functional necessity, and it had somehow become something else. He didn't have a precise word for what it had become. He knew only that the word stranger no longer applied, and hadn't for some time. At 2, they checked Lily's temperature, 100.4, coming down. Good, Nora said, and some tension in her shoulders released. She's okay. Yeah. They sat back down, him on the floor, her in the chair, and at some point, without planning to, Adrian fell asleep. He knew this because he woke at 4:17 with his neck at an angle that announced itself immediately and specifically, and Nora was still in the chair,
and Lily was sleeping, and nothing was wrong. Nora was asleep too, finally, her head tipped slightly to one side, coat blanket still in place. She looked, asleep, like a different version of herself than the one that moved through days with such deliberate capability. Younger, somehow, less braced. He sat and watched the room for a while. He thought about what it meant that this woman had gotten out of bed at midnight on a Thursday and taken a cab across the city because a child she had chosen, nobody had made her. There was no contract that required the level of devotion she gave. The arrangement they had made required only her presence and her effort. Not this, because a child she had chosen to love was sick and she needed to be there. He thought about the original phone call. I'm doing it for Lily. She had said that from the beginning, and he had understood it as a kind of disclaimer, a setting of expectations. He understood it differently now. It wasn't a disclaimer. It was simply the truest thing she knew how to say at the time. Lily woke at 6:30 with her temperature at 99.1 and a voice rougher than usual and the specific querulous energy of a child who is sick enough to feel bad, but not sick enough to be docile about it. I don't want to go to school, she announced, as though anyone had suggested this. You're not going to school, Nora said, awake instantly in the way she always woke. No gradual surfacing, just present. You're staying home. What about you? I called in last night. She looked at Lily directly. I'm staying. Lily looked at her for a moment with those gray eyes that were always taking inventory. You don't have to, she said, carefully, in the way she said things when she was trying not to want them. I know, Nora said. A beat. Okay, Lily said. She pulled her blanket up. Can we watch a movie? What movie? The one about the rats. Ratatouille? That one. I'll find it, Adrian said from the floor, where he had been apparently invisible to the conversation until this moment. Lily looked down at him. He was still in the position he'd woken up in, back against the wall, legs extended, neck making its complaints known. She appeared to assess this. Did you sleep on the floor? She asked. Yes. All night? Most of it. She looked at him for a second, this child who noticed everything. And something in her expression did what it had been doing incrementally over the months they'd been in the same space. It opened, slightly, the way a window opens. Not wide, not all the way. Just enough to change the air in the room. That can't have been comfortable, she said. It was not comfortable, he confirmed. Why didn't you go to your room? I didn't want to leave. She looked at him for another moment. Then she looked at her blanket. Okay, she said. And it was the same word she'd said to him when he told her he wanted to be her dad. That same weighted okay that wasn't agreement so much as acknowledgement. I heard that. I'm filing it. They watched Ratatouille in Lily's room, the three of them, with Lily in the bed under her blanket, and Nora in the chair and Adrian on the floor because the chair situation was non-repeatable, and the floor had at this point become his established position. Lily ate the toast Nora made and drank the orange juice and fell asleep midway through the second act, and neither Adrian nor Nora moved, and the movie played out for an audience of two adults who were not watching it because they were watching the sleeping child instead, and the morning light moved across the wall, and the city did what the city always did, which was keep going. She looks like her mother, Nora said quietly. Not asking, observing. In some ways, Adrian said. She has my eyes. Everything else is Claire. He nodded. The way she tilts her head when she's thinking, the exact expression she makes when she's being politely patient with an adult she finds slightly ridiculous. He paused. Claire did that. Same expression. Nora didn't say anything for a moment. Do you miss her? It was the kind of question that deserved a real answer. I miss who I thought she was. And I miss who I was when I was with her, which is a complicated thing because the person I was then made some terrible choices. He looked at his hands. What I feel most, honestly, is regret. Not for loving her, for how I handled the ending. He paused. She raised an extraordinary person, alone, and she protected Lily from the knowledge that I had let her down. She gave Lily a better father in absence than I gave her in reality. Nora was quiet. You're giving her something real now, she said finally. I'm trying. That's not the same as failing. She looked at him. People act like trying is a lesser thing. It's not. It's the thing. The second week of Lily's fever, it turned out to be a viral thing that the doctor confirmed was making the rounds at her school, the kind that lasted 10 days and required patience more than medication, was the week that the architecture of Adrian's life rearranged itself in ways he hadn't anticipated. It rearranged because he didn't go to the office for 6 days. This was not, objectively, a catastrophe. He had a capable executive team and a chief of staff who could handle the daily operations. And the Meridian deal was closed, and the next significant acquisition wasn't in play until April. He could run his company from his phone, which he was doing, but in the spaces between calls, of which there were many, because he had also apparently decided to have fewer calls, he was in the apartment with a sick child and a woman who moved through his domestic space with the ease of someone who had made her peace with it. He made the pasta. The olive oil and garlic pasta from when he was 23. He found that he remembered exactly how to do it. The oil in the pan, low heat, garlic thin enough that you could see through it. The specific smell that meant the moment before it burned and needed to come off the heat. The pasta water that had to be the right saltiness. He made it for dinner on the 4th night of Lily's sick week, and she ate it from the couch wrapped in her blanket and said, with the authority of a child who had eaten many things, "This is really good." "It's the only thing I know how to make," he said. "That's very specific," she said, which was what he had said to her once about her observation that he went still when nervous. She used it back at him deliberately, he could tell. There was a small satisfaction in her expression. "It is," he agreed. She ate more pasta. "Nora says you didn't leave for work once this week." "I worked from here." "That's not the same as leaving," Lily said, with the precision of someone who had been tracking the distinction. "You were here." She looked at the TV, which was on with the sound low. "My mom used to have to go to work even when I was sick. She'd set up stuff for me before she left and call on her breaks." She paused. "I don't mean that like, I'm not saying you're bad for having work." "I know," he said. "I'm saying it's different when someone stays." She pulled the blanket up. "That's all." He sat with that. Later, after Lily was asleep, Nora found him standing at the kitchen counter staring at nothing in particular, and she stood beside him for a moment before she said anything. "She told you the thing about Claire working when she was sick," Nora said. Not a question. "How did you know?" "She mentioned it to me last week. She thinks about those comparisons more than she lets on." Nora leaned against the counter. "She's not trying to make you feel guilty. She's trying to tell you what matters to her." "I know," he said. "I heard it." "Good." He turned to look at her. They were close in the way that people become close when they've been sharing a small space under pressure for an extended period. The distance between them was less than it had been at the beginning, not by design, but by the natural erosion of unfamiliarity that happens when two people are consistently, repeatedly, genuinely present in the same life. "Nora," he said. She looked at him. "I want to tell you something." He stopped, rearranged. I've been thinking about what this is, between us, what it's become." Her expression was careful, but not closed. "Okay? I know what it started as, and I know we made an arrangement that had terms, and I know those terms included a clear endpoint." He paused. "I'm not trying to rewrite what we agreed to, but I think I'd be dishonest if I didn't tell you that what I feel about you is not the same as what I felt on the day I called you. It's not the same category of thing." Nora didn't say anything immediately. She looked at him with that full, patient attention. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said. "I'm just telling you the truth, because it seemed important to say it out loud." She was quiet for a long moment. "I know," she said finally. "You know. I've known for a while." She pushed off the counter and moved to refill her glass from the tap. "I've been trying to figure out what to do with it." "And?" "I haven't figured it out yet." She turned around, leaning against the sink. "What you're feeling might be real. I think it is. I also think you've been through an enormous amount of change in a very short time, and that change includes someone showing up consistently and being reliable in ways that maybe you haven't had before. And sometimes that can look like more than it is." It doesn't feel like confusion, he said. I know, that's not what I'm saying. She held the glass in both hands. I'm saying I need time to know what it is, not because I'm uncertain about you necessarily, because I need to know what it is for me. She met his eyes. Can you give me that? Yes, he said. No negotiation, no counteroffer. She nodded once. Okay. He nodded back. They stood in the kitchen for another moment. The pasta was good, by the way, she said. It's the only thing I can make. Then you should make it more often. Lily's fever broke on a Sunday morning. She woke up at 7 and came into the kitchen where Adrian was making coffee in the specific way Nora had showed him because she'd objected to the machine he'd been using on the grounds that it made coffee taste like hot nothing. And Lily came in and stood in the middle of the kitchen and looked different. Not dramatically different, just like herself again. The specific Liliness of her that the fever had temporarily muted, the directness and the awareness and the small contained energy of her. I feel better, she announced. Good, he said. You look better. She climbed onto her stool. Is there orange juice? Yes. Can I have some? Yes. He poured it. She drank it, looked at him. Dad, she said, and then stopped. He froze. She seemed to realize what she'd said. She looked down at the counter, a long pause. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean. Don't apologize, he said. His voice came out steadier than he felt, which was a small miracle. Don't apologize for that. She looked up. Her expression was somewhere between uncertain and defiant, which was a combination he recognized as specifically hers, the face she made when she'd done something that felt right, and she was prepared to defend it. I've been thinking about it, she said carefully, whether I wanted to call you that. I wasn't sure. A pause. I'm still not completely sure, but I said it and it didn't feel wrong. He thought about all the things you were supposed to say in a moment like this. He thought about the speeches he might have prepared, the careful words, the measured acknowledgement. He thought about how thoroughly he did not want to say any of those things. Okay, he said. Just okay? That's the most honest response I have, he said. I don't want to make it bigger than it needs to be in this moment. You said it. It's yours. You can decide what to do with it. Lily looked at her orange juice. That's a very weird thing to say. I know, but I think it's right, she said. Okay. Stop saying okay. Sorry. She almost laughed. The almost laugh which he had catalogued carefully over months, which was more Lily than the real laugh because it came without intention. You couldn't make Lily almost laugh, it just happened. The almost laugh arrived and went and left the kitchen slightly warmer. I'm hungry, she said. Can we have pancakes? I can make pasta. That's not a breakfast food. I know. That's why I'm going to call Nora and tell her Lily has recovered and would like pancakes, which is a Nora-level cooking request. Lily seemed to find this acceptable. She watched him pick up his phone. Adrian, she said. He looked up. Thank you, she said, for staying all week. She said it the same way she'd thanked him the day he sat on the floor with her, quickly and quietly and without looking at him, like a concession to something. That's not something you need to thank me for, he said. I know, she said. I'm doing it anyway. He called Nora. She picked up on the third ring, already sounding like she'd been awake for a while. She's better, he said. A pause, the kind that carries relief in it. Good. She's asking for pancakes. Of course she is. He could hear Nora moving, the familiar sounds of her getting ready to come over, which was a sound he had learned without noticing. 20 minutes. She arrived in 19. She came in with the particular energy of someone who has been waiting for good news and has just received it. And she went directly to Lily, who was still on her stool at the island, and she put a hand on Lily's forehead the way you do when you want to verify something you've already been told. And Lily tolerated this with the patience of a child who has been assessed by adult hands all week. Cool, Nora said. Completely cool. I told you I felt better, Lily said. I believe things I can verify, Nora said. That's very scientific. It is. She got the pancake ingredients from the cabinet without asking where anything was, because she knew where everything was, because this had become her kitchen as much as his. Adrian stood to the side and watched the two of them, Lily explaining at length the exact diameter of ideal pancakes as Nora measured flour, the comfortable argument about whether chocolate chips were an essential ingredient or a corruption, the way Lily leaned forward on her stool to peer into the bowl and offer opinions on the batter consistency. He watched this and thought, there was a version of this that I almost missed. There were 43 messages I didn't read, and there was a hearing I almost didn't fight for, and there was a phone call I made at 7 in the morning to a woman I'd met once who said yes to the most unreasonable thing anyone had ever asked of her. There were 100 places in the sequence where the thread could have broken. He thought about the court date in 7 days, about Judge Voss and Gerald Okafor's report and the permanent custody determination that was, by every measure Marcus could calculate, likely to go in their favor. Likely. Still likely, not certain. Still a variable he couldn't control. "You're doing the still thing," Lily said without looking at him. She had, apparently, been monitoring him peripherally while discussing pancake diameter. "What still thing?" "Where you go very still because you're nervous," she looked up. "The hearing is next week." "Yes." "Are you scared?" He thought about the honest answer. "Yes." Lily nodded, like this was reasonable data. "Nora says you're going to be fine." Nora's very reassuring. "She's not usually reassuring," Lily said. "She says what's true. So if she says you're going to be fine, she thinks you're going to be fine." A pause. "She doesn't say things she doesn't mean." "No," Adrian agreed. "She doesn't." Lily looked at the bowl Nora was stirring. "I want to stay," she said quietly. Matter of fact, stripped of drama, the way she said the things that mattered most. "I told Miss Mercer. I'm telling you too." She looked at him. "I want to stay." The first pancake hit the pan. The kitchen smelled like butter and batter and the coffee he'd made, and somewhere underneath all of it, distantly, the faint ghost of lemon and parsley from the soup they'd made again last Tuesday. "I want that too," Adrian said. "More than I've wanted most things." Lily looked at him one more second and then looked back at the pan. "Okay then," she said. 7 days to the hearing. 7 days in which Adrian Cross, who had built an empire on the certainty of outcomes he could engineer and control, was going to have to sit with the fact that the most important outcome of his life was not his to engineer. He was going to have to walk into a courtroom and stand in front of a judge and be honestly, imperfectly, irreducibly himself. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the person with the legal team and the favorable evaluations and the well-documented trajectory of improvement. Just a man who had made a serious mistake and spent the last 4 months trying to become someone his daughter could count on. That was all he had. He was going to have to hope it was enough. The morning of the hearing, Adrian woke at 5:15 without an alarm. He lay in the dark for a few minutes, doing the thing he'd been doing for 7 days, running the variables, assessing the probabilities, trying to find the angle he hadn't covered or the gap in Marcus's preparation that could be filled in the hours remaining. He'd been doing it every morning for a week, and every morning he arrived at the same conclusion, which was that there was nothing left to prepare and nothing left to do except show up and be honest, and that this conclusion was the most uncomfortable one available to him because it left him with nothing to manage. He got up, made coffee, stood at the window in the early dark and looked at the city below. The lights of it, the particular density of Manhattan before the day got going, cabs and early workers, and the infrastructure of a place that did not pause for anyone's personal reckoning. He heard Lily's door. She appeared in the kitchen at 5:40 in her pajamas, the ones with the small stars on them, her hair compressed on one side from sleep, and her expression carrying the specific alertness of someone who had also not been sleeping well. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." She climbed onto her stool, looked at the coffee. "Can I have hot chocolate?" "At 5:40 in the morning?" "It's a special occasion." He made her hot chocolate, the real kind, the way Nora had shown him. Actual milk, actual cocoa, the right amount of sugar. He'd learned to make it somewhere in February and had been making it ever since when Lily asked, which was not every day, but often enough that he knew the recipe without thinking. She wrapped her hands around the mug, They sat in the dark kitchen with the city lights below and the hot chocolate steaming between them. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Yes," he said. He'd stopped editing this answer. She always knew when he was editing. "Me too." She looked into the mug. "What happens if it doesn't go the way Marcus says?" He'd thought about this question extensively and had prepared multiple versions of an answer, all of which he now set aside. "I don't know exactly," he said, "but I know I'm not going to stop. Whatever happens today, I'm not walking away from you. That's not a variable." Lily was quiet for a moment. "You can say that, but there are things you can't control." "I know. So how do you know you won't have to?" "Because I know myself well enough now to know that there is nothing. No legal ruling, no court timeline, no process that is going to make me stop showing up for you." He paused. "I know that's not the same as a guarantee about the outcome today. I can't give you that guarantee. Nobody can." He looked at her. "What I can guarantee is me." She looked at him with those gray eyes that were his eyes and were also entirely her own. "That's better than what you said in September," she said, "when Gerald asked you why he should let me stay." "What did I say in September?" "You said you intended to be present. That's a future thing, a plan." She tilted her head slightly. "This is different." "How?" "Because it's about what you already are, not what you're going to try to be." She drank her hot chocolate. "Nora says there's a difference between promising to change and just being changed." "When did she say that?" "Last Tuesday. We were talking about you." "You and Nora talk about me?" "Sometimes. Don't be weird about it." She set the mug down. "She also said that watching you with me this past few months was like watching someone remember something they'd forgotten they knew. She said it like it was a good thing." Adrian absorbed this in the quiet of the early morning kitchen. "She's right," he said finally. "About most things." "I know," Lily said. "That's kind of annoying, actually." "It is a little." The almost laugh arrived and went. Nora showed up at 7. She had dressed for the occasion in a way that was characteristically Nora. Not formal, not performing formality, but put together in the specific way that meant she had thought about what the day required and met that requirement without excess. Dark blazer, dark pants, a scarf in a deep blue that Adrian had not seen before. She looked like herself, but concentrated. She looked at Lily first, which was always how it went. That immediate assessment, the checking in. "How are you?" "Scared," Lily said. "Good. People who aren't scared of important things aren't taking them seriously enough." She hung her coat. "Did you eat?" "Hot chocolate." "That's a drink. It has milk in it." "Adrian," Nora said. "I'll make eggs," he said. "Thank you." They ate breakfast at the kitchen island, the three of them. And the conversation was not about the hearing. Lily talked about the graphic novel she and Priya were working on, which had evolved from its original Weather Powers premise into something considerably more complex involving a secret underground library and what Lily described as a morally ambiguous archivist. Adrian asked questions about the archivist. Nora had opinions about underground libraries. The morning moved. At 8:30, Lily went to get dressed. Nora and Adrian stood in the kitchen with the remnants of breakfast between them. "Marcus called last night," Adrian said. "He's confident." "I know. He called me too." He looked at her. "He called you?" "He wanted to make sure I was prepared for what Judge Voss might ask." She started stacking plates. "He said she sometimes asks direct questions about the nature of the parental relationship, both parents." "What are you going to say?" Nora set the plates in the sink and turned around. "The truth. That we came into this under unusual circumstances and that those circumstances turned into something real." She met his eyes. "That's the truth." "Yes," he said. "It is." She held his gaze for a moment. That particular Nora quality, direct without being aggressive, seeing without performing the act of seeing. Then she said, "We should leave by 9:15. "I know." "And Adrian." She waited until he looked at her fully. "Whatever you feel in that courtroom, don't manage it. Don't perform confidence you don't have. Just be what you actually are." Which is a man who loves his daughter and is figuring out how to deserve it. She turned back to the sink. "That's enough. That's actually plenty." The drive to the courthouse was quiet. Lily sat between them in the back seat. She had positioned herself there without comment, simply climbed in and sat in the middle, and neither of them remarked on it. The city moved past the windows. March had arrived with the particular uncertainty of early spring in New York, cold still, but with a quality of light that suggested it wasn't going to be cold forever. Lily was holding a folded piece of paper. Adrian noticed it halfway through the drive. She'd been holding it since they got in the car, folded into a small square, both hands around it like it was something that needed safeguarding. "What's that?" he asked. She looked down at it. "I made something. For the judge." She paused. "Is that weird? Miss Mercer said I could give her something if I wanted. A statement, but I didn't want to write words, so I drew it. Can I see?" She hesitated, then she handed it over. He unfolded it. It was drawn in colored pencil. Careful, the way Lily drew when she was being serious rather than quick. It showed 3 figures, 2 tall and 1 small, standing in front of a building that Adrian recognized after a moment as the outline of his apartment building, the distinctive shape of it. The small figure was in the middle, holding the hands of both tall figures. Above the building, she had drawn a sun. Not the simple circle with rays version, but the complex, evolved sun she'd been working on since the first day. The one that had started as a sun and grown into something more personal, more particular, more hers. Around the edges of the drawing, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "This is my family. It is not perfect, but it is mine, and I want to keep it." Adrian held it for a long time. "It's good," he said, because that was the true thing and the only thing. "Is it too much?" she asked. "No," he said. "It's exactly right." Nora, who had been looking out the window, glanced over. He held up the drawing. She looked at it for a moment without speaking. Then she looked back out the window, and he could see the line of her jaw, the way she was holding her face steady, doing the thing she did when she felt something large and was deciding what to do with it. He folded the drawing carefully and gave it back to Lily. Marcus was waiting outside the courtroom with his 2 paralegals and the expression of a man who had reviewed his preparation and found it adequate and was performing calm for the benefit of his client. He shook Adrian's hand, nodded at Nora, crouched briefly to Lily's level. "Lily," he said, "how are you doing?" "Fine," she said, and then corrected herself immediately. "Actually scared, but Nora says scared is appropriate for important things." Marcus looked up at Nora with an expression that approached respect. "That's correct," he said. The courtroom was the same one as October. Same beige walls, same fluorescent quality to the light, same sense of a space designed to strip away everything extraneous and leave only the essential facts. Judge Voss was already seated when they filed in, silver-haired and composed, with the reading glasses she wore when reviewing documents pushed up onto her forehead. She looked at Lily first, not at Marcus, not at Adrian, not at the assembled documentation that represented 4 months of evaluations and reports and professional assessments. At Lily. A long, direct look, the look of someone who has spent a career looking at children in courtrooms and has learned to read them the way other people read text. Lily looked back. She did not look away. Judge Voss made a small sound that might have been approval and picked up the first document. Marcus presented. He was excellent at it, measured, clear, the product of 30 years of knowing exactly what a family court judge needed to hear and in what order. He walked through Gerald Okafor's assessments, the school reports, the medical record from the fever week where both adults were documented as present, the evidence of routine and consistency and emotional attunement that constituted, in legal terms, a stable home environment. When he was done, Judge Voss looked at Adrian. "Mr. Cross, in October you told me you were asking for the opportunity to demonstrate something. It's March now. Tell me what the last 4 months have looked like." He'd prepared an answer for this. He set it aside. "They've looked like learning," he said. "Mostly learning what I didn't know, about what children need, which is different from what I assumed, about what it means to be present. Not physically present, but actually present in the way that Lily can tell the difference between." He paused. "She can always tell the difference. Give me a specific example." "My daughter's mother died in October," he said. "Claire's birthday was in February. Lily didn't tell me. She kept it to herself. And I found her crying because the school had done an exercise about family and she hadn't known what to say. He paused. I sat on the floor of her room with her. I didn't try to fix it because there was nothing to fix. I just stayed. He looked at the judge. That's the whole example. There's nothing dramatic about it. But 3 months ago, I would have tried to fix it. I would have said something careful and useful and missed the point entirely. The fact that I knew to just stay, Lily taught me that. I didn't arrive here knowing it. Judge Voss was quiet for a moment. She looked at Nora. Ms. Hayes, your situation in this household is somewhat unusual. It is, Nora agreed. Can you characterize it for me? I came into this for Lily, Nora said. That's honest. I didn't know Adrian. I didn't know what kind of father he would be or what kind of home this would become. What I knew was that there was a child who needed someone to show up. She paused. What I know now is that the home we've built is real. The three of us have been through enough in 4 months, the adjustment, the sick nights, the hard conversations, that I can tell you it's not a performance. I'm not here because of a contract or a bank account. I'm here because Lily she's mine. Not by any legal definition, but in the way that matters. Judge Voss looked at Lily. Lily, she said, and her voice changed. Not softer exactly, but differently calibrated. Would you like to say something? Lily stood up from her chair. She unfolded her drawing. She walked to the bench, just walked up, directly, without asking permission, and placed it in front of the judge. I made this, she said. It says what I wanted to say better than I can say it. She stood there for a moment while Judge Voss looked at the drawing. I still miss my mom every day. That's not going to change, and I don't want it to change, because missing her is part of how I remember her. She paused, and her voice was steady in the way that things are steady when they have been held very carefully for a long time. But this is my family now. It's not perfect. My dad didn't know me for a long time, and that's a real thing that's really hard. And Nora and my dad are still figuring each other out, and that's sometimes weird to be around. She looked at Adrian briefly, then back at the judge. But they both stayed. Even when it was hard, they stayed. And I don't think I should have to leave people who stay. The courtroom was very quiet. Judge Voss looked at the drawing for another long moment. Then she looked at Lily with an expression that had something in it that was not quite what Adrian had ever seen on her face before. Not the careful professional neutrality, but something more human and more unguarded. You can sit down, Lily, she said. Lily went back to her seat. She sat between Adrian and Nora, and without making a production of it, without seeming to notice she was doing it, she took both their hands. Judge Voss wrote something, read something, wrote something else. The silence had a weight to it, not threatening, but present, the weight of something being decided carefully by someone who understood the full consequence of what they were deciding. Then she took off her reading glasses. In the matter of the permanent custody of Lily Claire Hathaway, she said, and her voice had resumed its formal register, the language of official proceedings, I am satisfied that the evidence presented demonstrates a stable, emotionally engaged home environment. I am satisfied that the primary caregiver, Mr. Cross, has demonstrated consistent and genuine parental involvement over the past 4 months. She paused. I am also satisfied, and I want to say this on record, that the character and commitment of Ms. Hayes has been a material factor in the successful establishment of this home environment, and that the child's emotional well-being has benefited substantially from her presence. She looked up. Permanent custody is granted to Adrian Cross, with open visitation rights as Lily may wish. This matter is concluded. She brought down the gavel. Adrian felt Lily's hand tighten around his. He didn't trust his voice, so he didn't use it. He squeezed her hand back and left it at that. On his other side, Nora exhaled. Just that. A long, quiet exhale. The sound of something held for months finally being set down. Marcus was already managing the paperwork with practiced efficiency. Diane Mercer was across the room, and when Adrian caught her eye, she gave him the small nod of someone who has seen enough outcomes to know which ones are worth acknowledging. Lily looked up at Adrian. Did we win? She asked. Yeah, he said. We did. She considered this. Okay, she said. Can we go home? They stopped for lunch on the way back, at a diner 3 blocks from the apartment that Lily had discovered sometime in January and had declared her specific preference over every restaurant Adrian had ever taken her to, including one that had a Michelin star and an 8-week waiting list. The diner had vinyl booths and laminated menus and a specific pie case near the counter that Lily had opinions about. She ordered pancakes because it was the right food for a significant occasion and because she had established early that pancakes were not subject to the time of day restrictions that other breakfast foods operated under. Adrian ordered coffee and the kind of sandwich that you only order in diners and nowhere else, and Nora got soup, which arrived in a heavy ceramic bowl and smelled nothing like Claire's recipe, which Lily pointed out immediately. It's a different soup, Nora said. I know, I'm just saying. You're allowed to say. Lily looked at the pie case across the diner. I want pie after, she said. You haven't eaten your pancakes. I'm planning ahead. That's very organized of you, Adrian said. She looked at him. You're in a good mood. I'm in an excellent mood. Because of the hearing? Because of the hearing, and because I'm having lunch with my daughter and my... He stopped. Nora raised an eyebrow, the faintest suggestion of a challenge or an invitation. He couldn't tell which, possibly both. And my Nora, he finished, which was neither the most eloquent thing he had ever said, nor the most strategic, but was entirely honest. And Nora looked at him across the table with an expression he had been learning to read over 4 months and was still not certain he had fully decoded. Lily looked between them. You two are doing the thing again, she said. What thing? Adrian said. The thing where you talk without talking. You do it a lot. She poured more syrup on her pancakes. It's pretty obvious. We'll work on being less obvious, Nora said. Don't, Lily said. It's fine. It's just, I know what it means. She said it in the same matter-of-fact tone she used for things that she had thought through privately and arrived at conclusions about before introducing them to conversation. It means you actually like each other, which took you both a while. She looked up. I'm not sure why it took you so long. These things take time, Nora said. Most things don't take that long. Most things aren't this complicated. Lily appeared to consider this argument and find it insufficient but not worth pressing right now. She returned to her pancakes with the focus of someone who has made a tactical retreat in order to enjoy breakfast. Adrian looked at Nora. She was looking back at him already. She's not wrong, he said quietly. She's almost never wrong, Nora agreed. That's one of the things I love about her. The word love landed in the ordinary way it does when it's actually ordinary. Not announced, not performed, just used, the way people use words when they have become simply true. Lily heard it. Adrian could see in the slight change of her expression that she heard it. She didn't say anything about it. She just ate her pancakes, and there was something in her face that was quieter than her usual watchfulness. Something closer to, if not quite, peace. The weeks that followed the hearing were different in a way that was difficult to name precisely, but was real. Something had settled. Not resolved. That was the wrong word, because the things that were hard were still hard, and the grief Lily carried was not going away, and Adrian and Nora's arrangement was still technically an arrangement with edges that hadn't been fully defined. But settled. Like a house after the foundation work is done, when the structure stops shifting and you can finally begin to live in it. Lily went back to school the Monday after the hearing, and that Friday she came home with a drawing she'd done in art class. Not one of her personal drawings, which she guarded with some privacy and only shared on her own terms, but a school assignment. The assignment had been to draw where you belong. Most of the class had drawn their houses or their bedrooms, or in one case, apparently a soccer field. Lily had drawn the kitchen, just the kitchen, the island, the stools, the window with the city view. 3 mugs on the counter. The orange lamp's glow visible through the doorway to her room. She put it on the refrigerator without comment, using the magnetic letters that Nora had bought at some point in February and that had since been used to spell increasingly elaborate messages. Currently, the refrigerator read Lily's kitchen, enter with respect and snacks, which had been there for 3 weeks. Adrian stood in front of the refrigerator and looked at the drawing for a long time. Nora found him there. She put it up herself, he said. I see that. She didn't ask, she just put it up. It's her refrigerator, Nora said. She can put things on it. He turned around. Nora was leaning in the doorway with her arms crossed, and the afternoon light was doing something to the kitchen that the morning light didn't do. It came in warmer, at a different angle, and everything in it looked slightly more like itself than usual. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Okay." "The year's almost up." He watched her face. "The agreement. We said a year." "I know when we said." "I know you know. I want to say it directly." He took a breath. "I don't want to honor that agreement. I want to tear it up. Not because Lily needs us to." He paused. "She does, but that's not why. I want to tear it up because I love you. I have for a while, and I haven't said it plainly because I was trying to give you room, and I was trying not to make it into something that complicated the practical reality of what we've built here." He looked at her. "But it's plain. It's just plain. I love you. And I would like, if you're willing, to stay married to you because I want to be married to you and not because of any agreement." Nora stood in the doorway. She looked at him for a moment. That full, patient, unhurried look. The one that he had learned meant she was not stalling. She was simply being thorough, making sure she was seeing clearly before she committed to what she saw. "You know I'm not easy," she said. "I know. I have opinions about everything, including things that aren't my business. I've noticed. I'm going to keep working. The grocery store, the residence at Ashford House. I'm not going to stop being a person who does those things because I live in a penthouse. I know, I don't want you to stop. And I still have my apartment in Harlem. You can keep it forever if you want." She was quiet for another moment, then she pushed off the doorway. "I love you too," she said, simply, without drama or decoration. "I've known it for a while. I was waiting to make sure it was real and not just circumstance, proximity, shared stress." She came to where he was standing. "It's real." "Yeah?" "It's real," she said. "You're annoying sometimes, and you still manage things when they don't need managing, and you have the emotional vocabulary of someone who learned feelings from business school." She was close now, close enough that her voice had dropped to something that was just between them. "But you sat on a floor all night for a sick child, and you asked me to tell you about Mr. Kowalski, and you stood in a courtroom and said the true thing instead of the prepared thing." She looked at him. "That's who you are now, not who you were at the beginning." "I wasn't that person at the beginning." "No, you weren't." "Lily made me better," he said. "We made each other better," Nora said. "That's how it's supposed to work." He put his hands on either side of her face, just held her face, this woman who had said yes to an insane phone call and shown up with grocery bags and sat in a chair all night and told the truth in a courtroom and taught him by example what it actually looked like to love someone without conditions. And he kissed her in the ordinary kitchen of the home they had built, standing in front of the refrigerator with Lily's drawing of where she belonged. From the hallway, a small voice said, "I knew it." They pulled back. Lily was standing in the kitchen doorway with the graphic novel notebook under her arm and the colored pencil she perpetually carried and an expression of profound vindication. "I knew it a long time ago," she said. "Lily," Adrian said, "I'm just saying." "Were you listening?" "I was getting a snack." She moved past them to the cabinet with the studied casualness of someone who is absolutely listening but will not admit it. "But also, yes." She got the crackers down, looked at them both. "So you're staying married? For real?" "For real," Nora said. Lily nodded. She seemed to be filing this information, assessing its implications, running the internal calculation that she ran on everything. "Okay," she said. "That's good." "Just good?" "It's great, but I already knew it was going to happen, so it's not a surprise." She went back toward the hallway with her crackers, stopped, turned around. "Can we do something, like a celebration or something? Not a big thing, just us." "What did you have in mind?" Adrian asked. "Soup," she said immediately. "The real version, the one that's actually right now." She looked at Nora. "You figured out the recipe?" "Version 6, Nora confirmed. "Version 6 is right," Lily said. "I think version 6 is what she made." She paused, and her voice was quieter for a second, the particular quiet that came when she was touching something real and wanted to be careful with it. I want to have it tonight. The three of us. She looked at the kitchen, at the drawing on the refrigerator, at them. In here. Okay, Nora said. Tonight. Lily went back to her room, the sound of her door, the crinkle of her crackers, and then quiet. Adrian stood in the kitchen and felt the full, specific weight of everything that had led to this moment. The phone call in October, the courthouse in the cold, 43 messages on a cracked old phone, a woman he'd called out of nowhere who had said yes for all the right reasons, a little girl with a garbage bag and a stickered door and a drawing of three figures in front of a building with a sun above it. The mistakes and the reckoning and the slow, unglamorous work of becoming someone your child can count on. He had $37 billion. He had an empire he'd built year by year out of intelligence and will and a comprehensive refusal to be outworked. He could look down from 42 floors at the city that had made him and know that he had, by the metrics that metrics measure, won. But the truth of it, the thing he knew now that he hadn't known a year ago, was that none of that had been the hard thing. The hard thing was this: the daily, imperfect, unoptimizable work of being someone's father and someone's partner, and a person who showed up, not because it was advantageous, but because someone needed you to, and you had decided, at some point in the night, that you were going to be the kind of person who stayed. He had not been that person in October. He was trying to become him, one Tuesday at a time, and he wasn't done, and he was going to make more mistakes, and there were going to be hard years ahead. Teenage years, and all the renegotiation that those brought, and grief that didn't have a schedule, and a marriage that was real now and would require everything real marriages require, which was not nothing. But tonight there was going to be soup. They made it together, the three of them. Lily supervising from her stool with the colored pencil still in her hand, Nora at the stove adjusting things by smell and instinct, and the notes she'd kept from the previous 5 attempts, Adrian chopping things when directed and being wrong about the garlic quantity again, but less wrong than before. The kitchen filled with lemon and parsley, and the particular warmth that happens when food is being made in a space where people actually live. At some point, Lily said quietly, not looking up from the drawing she'd started on the counter, "It smells like her." Nobody said anything to that. They didn't need to. Claire was in the room the way she was always in the room. In the gray of Lily's eyes and the directness of her expression and the specific recipe they'd spent months reconstructing from a child's memory of being loved. She wasn't gone. She was just held differently now, in the keeping of her, in the making sure her daughter knew she had been someone worth grieving, in the photograph on the nightstand and the soup on the stove, and the simple daily fact of a little girl who had been raised ferociously well by a woman who had done it alone and had still, somehow, found the generosity to protect her daughter from the knowledge of all the ways she'd been let down. That was Claire's gift. Not the one anyone talked about or put in legal documents, but the one that had made everything else possible. She had raised Lily to be open enough to let new people in, even after loss, even after being handed to a stranger. She had raised a child who could sit in a foreign kitchen on her first day and ask for the colored pencils and slowly, on her own terms, begin to make a place her own. Adrian thought, I owe her more than I can repay. The best I can do is not waste what she made. The soup was version 6, and version 6 was right. Lily tasted it from the spoon Nora held out and was quiet for a second, and then said, Yeah, that's it, with a finality that meant the search was over. They ate at the kitchen table instead of the island. Adrian had bought a table in January, a round one that Lily had picked out at a furniture store on a Saturday afternoon, because Lily had observed that the island was for quick things and a table was for staying. She had been right, as she often was. Lily ate her soup and told them about the graphic novel, the morally ambiguous archivist who had turned out, she'd decided, to not be morally ambiguous at all but simply misunderstood, which was a more interesting story. Adrian asked questions. Nora had structural feedback about the underground library that Lily took seriously. Outside the window, March was doing what March eventually does in New York, which was hint, tentatively and without commitment, at the possibility of something warmer. After dinner, after the dishes, after Lily had gone to do the pre-bed drawing she did most nights, Adrian and Nora sat at the kitchen table with the remnants of the evening between them. She said it smells like her, Adrian said. I know. Is that... He stopped. That's good, Nora said. That's exactly what it should be. She should be able to say it out loud in a room full of people and have it just be true, without anyone flinching. She turned her mug. That's what safe feels like. He looked at her. You knew that, he said. From the beginning, you knew that was what she needed. I knew what I'd needed, Nora said. When my mother died, I needed to be able to say her name out loud without people getting uncomfortable. I needed her to stay present in conversation. Most people wanted to move past it as soon as possible because grief makes people uncomfortable. And when you're grieving, you can feel that discomfort, and you start to hide the grief to protect everyone else. She paused. I didn't want Lily to hide it. She doesn't, he said. No, Nora agreed. She doesn't. He thought about this, about what it meant to create a space where grief didn't have to hide, about how different that was from the management of emotion he had spent 15 years practicing, about how somewhere between October and March, he had learned that the goal was not to make things okay, but to make it possible for things to be whatever they actually were. He had a long way still to go, he knew that. But he was in motion, in the right direction, in a life that was genuinely his. Not the curated version, not the managed version, not the version photographed for quarterly reports and social appearances, but the actual thing, with its mess and its stickered door and its almost right soup and its child who called him dad and meant it on her own terms. He had $37 billion. What he had that mattered fit in this kitchen. Lily appeared in the doorway at 9:15 in her star pajamas, later than she was supposed to be up, holding the graphic novel notebook. I finished chapter 3, she said. It's past bedtime, Nora said. I know, but I finished chapter 3. She looked at both of them. Can I read it out loud? It's not very long. Adrian looked at Nora. Nora looked at Adrian. Get comfortable, he said. We're listening. Lily sat down at the table, cross-legged on her chair, notebook open, colored pencil behind her ear, and began to read. Her voice had the particular quality that it got when she was reading her own work, slightly more formal than her regular speaking voice, but with her specific rhythms underneath it. The underground library. The archivist who turned out to be misunderstood. Two girls with the power to become weather, who discovered that the more useful skill was learning how to stay in the same place at the same time. Outside, the city moved. The table held, the family listened. This is not a story about a billionaire who bought his way to redemption. Money was never the answer to anything that actually mattered here. Not the custody hearing, not a child's grief, not the slow rebuilding of a man who had spent 15 years mistaking control for strength. What Adrian Cross had to offer, that was actually worth anything, had nothing to do with what was in his bank account. It had to do with sitting on a floor, staying all night, asking someone to tell him about Mr. Kowalski, learning to make soup. The things that change people are almost always small. That is the part nobody tells you. Not because it's a secret, but because small things are hard to sell. They don't make good headlines. They don't show up in quarterly reports. They happen in kitchens at 5:40 in the morning over hot chocolate, in bedrooms with orange lamps and stickered doors, in the space between two people who chose each other under pressure and discovered slowly and without elegance that the choice had become true. Lily read to the end of chapter 3. The archivist turned out to be keeping the library safe from people who wanted to use its contents as weapons. The two girls with weather powers decided that the most powerful thing either of them could do was stand still in a storm. She closed the notebook. What do you think? She asked. I think you're a writer, Nora said. Lily looked at Adrian. I think your mom would have loved it, he said. She held that for a moment. It was a true thing, and she knew it was a true thing, and the knowing moved across her face in the specific way that true things do when they land somewhere that needed them. Okay, she said. Bedtime. She got up, went to the doorway, paused. Dad, she said. Yeah. Will you come do the light? He got up, followed her down the hall to the room with the stickered door, turned the overhead off, leaving just the orange lamp, pulled the blanket up. The photograph of Claire and Lily at the beach was on the nightstand, catching the low light. Good night, he said. Good night. She was already settling, already doing the quick drop towards sleep that children do. Then, barely. Love you. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "Love you too," he said. He walked back to the kitchen. Nora was there washing the soup bowls, and the apartment was quiet around them in the way that it got quiet after Lily went to sleep. A different quality than other silence. Fuller somehow, like the presence of a sleeping child changed the acoustic character of a space. He stood beside Nora at the sink. "She said it," he said. "I heard," Nora said. He picked up a dish towel, started drying. They stood at the sink together in the quiet kitchen, doing the ordinary domestic work of the end of a day. And neither of them said anything else because nothing else needed saying. And outside the windows, the city moved through its March night in all its indifferent enormity. And inside, in the warm and imperfect life they had built from the pieces of a bad decision and a good phone call and a little girl who had deserved better and gotten something real instead, everything was exactly as it needed to be. Not perfect, better than perfect, true.